Good morning, everyone. Nau mai, haere mai, ki te pane matua taiao. Welcome to the first meeting for the Triennium of the Environment and Climate Change Committee. Welcome to councillors around the table and colleagues, to Greater Wellington staff, and to members of the public, residents and ratepayers. One of me is not enough, so there's an echo. Me karakia tātou. Manawa mai te Māori nuku, manawa mai te Māori rangi. He manawa nui, he manawa tahi, he manawa ora e. Ka whakamaua ki a tīna, hui e, tai ki e. A couple of reminders before we begin. This meeting is live streamed and is available as a video recording on YouTube for people to view afterwards. We have a very busy agenda this morning, and not all items on it are straightforward. Some of them are new, some of them are complex. We also have a petition being presented, which will be the first item of business after these procedural moments. So I'm seeking your assistance to make this meeting run smoothly and ensure that we get through to lunch. I've brought a few tools to help me. I've got a whistle if I need it. I've got a multi-tool. I don't know what I might need that for. And if it all gets too much, I've got a life jacket. But actually, the main tools for making this meeting constructive and productive for everyone concerned is for your participation and clear and concise questions, councillors, during question time, and for members of the public presenting to also be concise to the point. If you can go under your allotted time, that would be appreciated, but we will make sure that everyone has time to be heard, time for robust questioning, and then for debate. Just before we get to the first item of business, I just want to draw councillors' attention to the terms of reference for this committee. Now, this is a new committee. In the last triennium, we had two committees, Environment Committee and Climate Committee, both ably chaired by Councillor Gaylor. This triennium, we have chosen to combine those into one Environment and Climate Committee. And just to remind councillors that our terms of reference are to oversee the development, implementation and review of Greater Wellington's work in environment and climate areas. Where we wish to change those things, it would be a recommendation to council to adjust those strategies and programs and things. But because we are a committee of the whole, we have a lot of leeway for giving guidance on the matters before us. Our terms of reference also require us to have a responsibility towards the Te Tiriti principles of the council and to provide leadership on climate change, both for Greater Wellington and for the region. And then the third housekeeping thing is a member of this committee is the chair of the farming reference group. Now that person is not here today because we haven't finished the appointment process for the farming reference group yet. In fact, nominations close tomorrow. So if you're keen, you've got 24 hours to get your nomination in. Our next meeting in a month's time, that person, the chair, will be appointed and will be present at that meeting. So, following those just initial remarks, I'll start with the first item on the agenda, which is apologies. We've received apologies from Councillor Darren Ponta, Councillor Shamia Makarini and Councillor Simon Wolfe. Are there any further apologies?
Apology for early departure from the workshop.
Thank you.
Not meeting.
So I move those apologies be accepted and question from...
No, it's not a question. I have to be out of here by 1 p.m, but I think I'd sent a note on.
Hopefully, I'll do best endeavours to be done by 1 p.m. Thank you, Councillor Johnstone. So I move those apologies be accepted. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Saw. All those in favour? Any objections? No. Moving to our second item on the agenda, which is conflict of interest declarations. Do any councillors wish to raise a conflict of interest? Councillor Connolly.
Yes, so I have a conflict of interest in relation to the item on avian influenza. I have recently finished as an employee at Fish and Game, which is has a significant interest in the management of avian flu, and I will continue doing some work for them in a more casual basis. Just declaring that, but it is for noting paper, so I will still join in the conversation if that's all right.
Given it's not a decision paper, I'm comfortable with that, unless standing orders require that you leave the room for that conversation. Is that the case? So standing orders require that if you've declared a conflict of interest, you can't participate in that conversation. So there will be other ways you can ask your questions. Perhaps via the chair following the meeting. Thank you, Councillor Connolly. Moving to our first substantive item on the agenda, which is the presentation of a petition from the Preserve Belmont Farm Park Group. If you could please come forward and introduce yourselves and present your petition. We have 10 minutes for presenting the petition, and then we have time for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Sandra Stevenson. Thank you for meeting with us today. We speak today not just for our group, but for the wider community who value Belmont as a working farm, open, safe, accessible and well managed. The decision to remove grazing from the 2021 draft Parks Network Plan, which received only 11 submissions about Belmont. So many park users and neighbours weren't aware of such a major change. At the meeting on the 12th of December, Chris Bishop and 3 councillors agreed that the process wasn't right. Chris Bishop has said he encourages Greater Wellington to reset the process and work constructively with community to ensure outcomes that are balanced, durable and supported. We are here to present the 2017 signatures and submissions, so please do not disregard them, as happened with our 2023 petition of 1,392 signatures. We ask that you read and consider them carefully. I've been a local resident and park user for 25 years. Last week I rode my bike up through the park for the first time since the animals were removed. It felt sad and empty. Animals bring life and joy. And grazing keeps the park open, safe and enjoyable for walkers, cyclists and horse riders. Sorry, that was... Okay.
Clickety clicks and everything.
It's not working.
Well, I was just going to say, are we cool?
We're going to time it. Okay, this was meant to be the first one of my first slide that I've just talked about. So you can see that all park users love the park. You know, we ride it, we horse ride it, we walk it, and we love farming. So I'll just go on to the third slide. Okay. In 2015, Greater Wellington opened a new farm hub at Belmont, complete with a world-class woolshed, a new house and upgraded fencing and yards. Yet just 5 years later, in 2020, the decision was made to remove farming from the park. What a waste of taxpayers' dollars. Not working? Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh, go back. Okay, no, next one. Okay. Maybe she come up. So there's just what I said in my second slide. And third one, okay. Here is an example of a walking track in Belmont Regional Park that every year I have to contact Greater Wellington to request that the grass to be cut because it grows up over my knees, beyond the point the track becomes increasingly overgrown and relies heavily on volunteers to keep it passable. This raises concerns about adding another 1,000 hectares remaining safe and accessible without depending on volunteers to fill the gaps. In a letter to Chris Bishop in October 2025, Greater Wellington said gorse and other weeds would be controlled. Yet the latest plan relies heavily on gorse as a nursery. Gorse is invasive. Its seeds survive up to 80 years in the soil. It smothers other plants. Gorse can make soil more acidic, which will limit the types of native plants that can grow. Gorse will thrive on Belmont's windy hills and poses a serious virus spreading seeds further in a blaze. Greater Wellington requires full year-round public access to the park, but without grazing, paddocks will become overgrown and grass, weeds and gorse, forcing closures in summer when fire risk is highest. Belmont layout makes it impossible to isolate effectively. Belmont Regional Park covers 3,500 hectares, with about 2,500 hectares already a native bush or regenerating scrub. Significant retired areas of the park in Waitangarua on the Pairua side and the Lady Di and the Kilmister blocks on the Lower Hutt side have been left in disrepair. We need to protect our open green spaces. Belmont is unique, offering bush and open landscapes with a working farm. All nearby and accessible by walking and biking. Unlike Battle Hill Farm Forest Park, which requires transport to reach and experience a small working farm environment, Belmont provides the opportunity within easy reach of surrounding communities. Okay. All of us here today share the same goal, protecting our waterways. Greater Wellington can do this while keeping the 1,000-hectare farm. A 2011 land use plan mapped waterways and proposed sustainable management with targeted actions, fencing, riparian planting and better management. Belmont can safeguard their environment while keeping its farming, open landscapes and heritage. Greater Wellington has managed the park for 21 years and has not invested in stock water reticulation, leaving waterways as the only drinking source. Greater Wellington has already invested significant public money in fencing waterways in parts of Belmont Regional Park, but unfortunately most of this fencing is not being maintained. The Kilmister block is a clear example of neglect. Electric fencing cannot function when gorse has overgrown on it. As we understand it, gorse control has been prohibited in the park. It spreads aggressively and can contribute nitrogen leaching into the waterways. By contrast, where waterways are properly fenced, maintained and integrated as an actively managed farming system, the results can be effective and sustainable. We also question current practices in some areas. On a walk near the entrance of the park, waterways have been sprayed, raising concerns about how this aligns with the stated goal of protecting water quality. We urge Greater Wellington to consider a stable, workable long-term lease, immediately retiring 300 to 350 hectares of some of the best pasture in Belmont is a drastic step, especially when you have the recent expressions of interest for a short-term lease appear unprofessional and impractical, creating uncertainty rather than stability. Animal welfare must also be considered. You cannot simply farm the exposed tops of this high country landscape. Parts of the park reach elevations comparable to the highest areas of Transmission Gully. Livestock need access to shelter from the strong northerly and southerly winds that regularly affect Belmont. No guarantee simply retiring land will result in a thriving native forest. The area is extremely exposed and regeneration is not automatic. Once significant land use changes are made, they are difficult to reverse. We ask you take a cautious, evidence-based approach and retain active land management so Belmont remains safe, usable, environmentally responsible and valued by the whole community. Thank you.
I'm a fairly regular walker in Belmont. What I also do is I do trapping in another Greater Wellington park, which is East Harbour, and I've been doing that for about 20 years. One of the things I have noticed is it's very hard to get volunteers to do this kind of thing. And we had a little walk around a little circuit in Belmont, and these some of the traps we looked at, and the majority of them didn't have any bait, and obviously the local volunteers are struggling to service them to the sort of required level to keep on top of pests. So as I say, it's just a big battle to get volunteers over a sustained period. You can call people out for a busy day of planting or whatever, but month after month, year after year, you just need. It's very hard to do a lot of things with volunteers. So some things need to be done with professionals. The other thing I want to talk about is planting. There's a couple of pictures here showing plants at different stages of over a period 2022 and 2025, and basically these are the areas that have been planted. Basically, they're not looking in very good shape. What I also want to talk about is the cost of planting. Looked into some experience by the New Zealand Forest Service in a report of 2021, and they came up with a cost of restoration for native forest in the range of $22,000 to $27,000 per hectare for full planting at one typical 1.5 metre spacing, or 4,400 plants per hectare. To apply that number to Belmont, you'd be talking the $20 to $30 million range. I don't believe that Greater Wellington was ever considering spending that kind of money when it originally proposed removing the grazing. I can't believe that. And even at a 20% planting rate, you're still talking about $4 or $5 million if you professionally. Those figures are actually borne out by a document the document that is being looked at the moment. And I've gone through the attachment 1 of the Belmont Regional Park long-term restoration strategy, and I've just gone through some of the points. There's 81, I think, paragraphs in there, so I've just picked a few of them, and I won't do them all today because we just don't have time. But the indications of work from approximately 800,000 plants have been planted across 30 hectares of 360 hectares of regional park land at a cost of about $90 million, and that actually equates to the $25,000 per hectare figure for concentrated planting. So this is, if you are going to do concentrated planting, that's the kind of money you're talking about. If you're going to do 20%, you're still talking about a lot of money. And coming back to what I was talking about before, volunteers, you can do a certain amount of work with volunteers, but if you want a sustained work plan that actually is done thoroughly and maintained over a period of time, you really be struggling to do it with volunteers.
Thank you. That's the end of 10 minutes. Would you like to just some closing comments?
Can we just finish with Paul, because I think it's very important to us.
Thank you.
I'll talk too fast.
Yep.
Right, my references today relate to the Environment and Climate Committee document that you have in front of you. My background, apart from being the neighbour with a 3.5 kilometre boundary with Belmont Regional Park and Dry Creek, is that I was a rural fire commander for 12 years with the Hastings District Council, also included the EMO. I was also a rural firefighter for the Department of Conservation during this time. In today's document, number 26H, utilities, which states that there will be access and setbacks for power lines and gas lines as we restore vegetation. I'm unsure of the gas line, but there is required 20 metres either side of the transmission line corridor. How is this going to be maintained? Long rank grass and gorse will become a fire hazard amongst your native bush in 100 years' time. When I was in Hawke's Bay, there were many fires started with this in the summer with transmission wires arcing or aluminium joiners melting. These are all major fire risks, and I've not been able to find a single fire management strategy plan which highlights how these areas will be mitigated in a fire. Heat, low humidity, wind and drought add topography, and you have the perfect fire predicament. The only fire prevention measures mentioned are fire breaks and public signage. From 11 through to 23 there are so-called fire breaks. These are either mown or planted. Both of these strategies are designed for residential areas to try and reduce the spread of fire embers toward property. These are totally ineffective on bush, farm or forestry areas. What species are going to be planted in the green areas? Will they grow in our climate on exposed areas? How long does it take for them to grow before they are effective? Where will these fire breaks be placed? This is the future of Belmont. We all know that gorse and kānaka are highly flammable. Combined with the long grasses are going to be what 80% of Belmont will look like in 4 years. A fire in these conditions will be unstoppable. In number 2, it mentions lesson learned from Queen Elizabeth Park. What are these lessons? Whareroa Farm is an absolute mess filled with long rank grass and gorse, an extreme fire hazard. Exactly what Belmont will become. This is also what my boundary looks like. There are already big areas of gorse on Belmont growing through our western boundary fence as well as Dry Creek. Under Section 17 of the Fencing Act, Greater Wellington Regional Council are going to be responsible for the maintenance of the fence, if all their scrub and trees, etc., damage the fence and all neighbouring fences. But when my stock get into Belmont through bad fences, I expect them to be returned and not shot like they have been done to all my other neighbours. In Belmont Regional Park, with the northwesterly winds at 50 kilometres an hour, high fire periods can push embers over 2 kilometres, enough to threaten houses. The new grazer is not allowed to spray gorse, so according to number 20, in 4 years, not only will there be 520 hectares of long grass and gorse, there will also be a significant amount of gorse on the remaining 300 hectares. The Tongariro fire is a fine example of, in the right conditions with the right fuel, how quickly a fire can start and travel. I've fought several fires in the Kaweka Forest Park. Some of these were 100 years old. Don't be fooled into thinking once established there will be no or little fire risk. And finally, on number 26, K states cost, return of investment of planting, etc., minimising capital expenditure in the first 10 years. Only minimising, not making a profit or even breaking even, just minimising. In the latest Farmers Weekly, it states that carbon credit prices in the NZU have dropped in the last year from $63 per tonne to $41 per tonne. Banking on carbon credits is a 50-year gamble, and quite frankly, no one knows if carbon credits will be around in 50 years. There are also going to be more expenses in maintaining and upkeep of park tracks. There are discussions regarding overnight camping, which will not only increase more expenses, but also greater fire risk. You can't tell me that the infrastructure is already there. What is return on investment that was made of the old Shepherd's House, now Boulder Field House, which Greater Wellington Regional Council Airbnb at $425 per night? There are only 12 bookings so far this year. With the ongoing costs, how long is it going to minimise the capital expenditure on this investment? During last year's election, candidates, you were all saying the same thing, cut expenditure. So spend our money wisely. It was quick, eh?
Thank you very much. Thank you for rattling through that. We've gone a few minutes over time, so that restricts questions. However, we now have time for questions from councillors, committee members to the petitioners. Who would like to go first? No questions? Okay, I have one question, please, before you go. In the paper on our agenda today, which you're familiar with, that outlines an option 1 and an option 2. Is option 2 effectively what you are seeking?
Which is to keep the farming. What are the 2 options? Sorry, quickly.
It was a bit confusing, to be honest.
Yeah,
It
what
was
were the 2
quite-
options?
Do you have a
wasn't
comment
clear.
on the options that are presented in that paper, or an alternative option?
Well, I mean, God, we've only had since Monday
Yeah.
to read all this.
I only read through that
all the
last night,
documents
so-
you sent us.
Okay.
Just read it quickly.
It's
So
pretty-
what are just briefly, what are the 2 options?
I
That's
saw
what
the
I'm
options,
asking
but
you.
it looked a little bit hard to.
Okay. So the options are in the paper. So we will discuss the options when we
293
get to the
pages of
paper.
document. I mean, it's extremely
Okay.
move around, jump from here to here to there. It's all over the place.
And
I mean,
It's almost designed to confuse.
I
I
mean,
would say.
Considering that you've allowed other people, other groups to have a look in the draft copy of what you presented today back in November and December last year, which I sent you guys in the email, and we've only been given like 2 or 3 days to read it. Like, this is not long enough to work through it all, to be honest.
Yeah, and to be fair, if the councillors don't know what option 1 and 2 are, I don't know how you expect us to know what they are.
Well, councillors should know because they've read the papers, I'm sure, and they were received on the weekend by councillors. So thank you for your time. We have more public participants next, so appreciate that. And you've got paper copies of the petition there, and we have received them in electronic form as well.
So it's all double-sided, we should just leave them here.
Thank you. Thank you. Give them to Lucas. First person in public participation is Anthony Davies from the Friends of Belmont Regional Park, and Jonathan Ravens as well, speaking to item 5, which is the Belmont paper on our agenda today. Over to you, Anthony and Jonathan. Cool. 5 minutes. There'll be one ballot, 4 minutes, and then a double ballot, 5 minutes. And let's try and keep it to 5 minutes, please, so we have time for questions.
Morena, I'm Anthony Davies, convener of the Friends of Belmont Regional Park, and thanks, it's weird talking with the echo, thanks for allowing the engagement with the committee for feedback and for helping shape the future of the Belmont Regional Park. This is particularly relating to the grazing licence and the retirement plan. Since its inception in 1973, which is when the idea of it was mooted, and its official opening in 1986, the park has provided a large landscape for the region of Wellington. These large landscape parks are part of the DNA of the people of Wellington, as they are easy and quick access wilderness areas and open areas. In 2002, Friends of Belmont Regional Park was formed to enhance community engagement and input to the Belmont Regional Park. We work in support of and help provide community groups input to park rangers and council officers to help with park management. In 2016, we mostly supported as a group, we supported the intensive farming operation to increase production of the farm, although negative aspects of this was total closure of the farm during the lambing season, which obviously negates planting and public access for pest management, and intensive pest management that led to some regenerating bush being sprayed. There was some disagreement within the Friends of the Belmont Regional Park in terms of this approach in park management. In 2019, reviews concluded that the farm was not producing the commercial return expected, and the Greater Wellington climate emergency reshaped how the park could be used to benefit Wellington. The plans envisaged destocking and allowing large-scale native regeneration to occur to help with carbon offsets Greater Wellington need to offset some of their Greater Wellington's emissions. In 2020, Toitu Whenua is approved, and the Friends pivoted to support this. I believe that this change has allowed an improved community engagement, as the climate crisis is very real, and people felt that they could contribute in a physical and meaning sense by being involved in the park in terms of pest management, pest animal management, and tree planting, etc. As a group, we work as an umbrella organisation, and we have 2 other large groups that work underneath us that for very successful trapping regimes in the Korokoro Basin. There's appetite to expand this as needed, and we intend to work in step with council officers as the bush expands out to be able to meet the demands of protecting the forest as it develops. Through a thorough process of engagement with the Friends of Belmont Regional Park and the groups that we represent, the park officers worked with us to establish priority areas for community groups while balancing the larger land management tools and principles for the betterment of the park. We, as the Friends of the Belmont Regional Park, we want to promote engagement and promote people to go in. Part of the idea is to allow areas and key areas for small-scale public involvement, which helps people get into the park, which fills out the large areas of bush as we move forward. We realise, I'll go on, but this lands us at the current grazing licence and retirement planting plan, which the Friends of the Belmont Regional Park supports. We would have preferred that some of the springs in the dress circle, which are the headwaters of the Korokoro stream and the Waitaha stream, were fenced off, but we understand that for grazing to occur in those areas, that free water at the top there needs to be accessible. We would still like those natural springs to be fenced off and excluded from grazing, but we understand there is cost in reticulated water for stock grazing. We understand that the fire risk has been acknowledged and understood, and understand that low flammability planting plans have been drawn up, and that there is a community engagement from the rangers in terms of plant types and accessibility in areas if people would like to do planting for themselves. This is the largest reforestation project in New Zealand, and it is both exciting and daunting, but it's amazing to be involved with a multi-generational project at this stage. This energy that is part around this helps with community engagement and the continued love of the Belmont Regional Park. We, the Friends of Belmont Regional Park, support the grazing licence and retirement plans as they, with the staged at 400, I think 300 to 400 of the first bit, and then the 80-20 split going through. And we support the pragmatic land management approaches in place. Friends of the Belmont Regional Park wish to be involved with the master planning and will work to support community engagement around this. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Anthony and Jonathan. Questions from councillors? There are no questions. Thank you for presenting that to us. Next public participant is Robin Smith. No, is Tamsin Falconer, who I understand is online. Are you there, Tamsin? Oh no, you're in person. Tamsin is from the Korokoro Environmental Group. Welcome, Tamsin. Ballot 4 minutes, double ballot 5 minutes, and then questions. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, everyone. Yes, my name's Tamsin Falconer. I'm the current chair for the Korokoro Environment Group. Our purpose as a group is to advocate for the preservation and enhancement of the natural environment in our local area and to take actions to support that advocacy. Part of our role, as we see it, is to educate and to inform the public and our community and to work with others, including mana whenua and council. So what do? We have an active group that regularly does planting and clean-up activities in our suburb, as well as so planting and weeding and maintaining our planting areas. Our particular area of interest in the Belmont Regional Park is Te Korokoro o Te Mana, the Korokoro stream catchment. We note that this is also recognised as a very highly significant place to mana whenua and noted in multiple schedules that the council recognises the uniqueness and specialness of that stream. Our activities in the stream area in recent times have included engagement with mana whenua to understand values of the stream, active planting and plant maintenance, working to understand fish alongside Greater Wellington staff to advocate for improved fish passage and to monitor the fish that are in the stream, an active program of stream monitoring, and work on community engagement, notably with the Petone to Granada proposals. The vast majority of our work is done in parallel and is supported by Greater Wellington teams, from the fish passage to the stream monitoring and the planting. We work with multiple Greater Wellington teams. In terms of the future of Belmont Regional Park, our priority focus is our local area, so on Te Korokoro o Te Mana, the Korokoro stream catchment. We would like to see regeneration of that full catchment ki uta ki tai, from the headwaters to the harbour. Currently, the headwaters, which include a large spring, are grazed with unfettered stock access. Our priority with that is to, over time, see regeneration. We also want to see any impact of Petone to Granada mitigated, notably to avoid any culverting and to ensure access to the park. We have other concerns about Petone to Granada and impacts on our suburb, but those are not related to the park. In this future vision, we would like to see us as a wider community honouring mana whenua values, as the stream is so significant to mana whenua and is one of the few that flows directly into the harbour without culverting. Our ask of the council is to progress with the change from farming to regeneration. acknowledging that this does include grazing in the short term, but is a long-term multi-generational plan. We ask also that you prioritise the integrity of the Korokoro catchment and that you involve us in the work and the planning, use our labour and our knowledge of our local area. And thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Tamsin. I didn't even have a bell there, so gold star. We were in your neighbourhood yesterday. Some councillors did a site visit to Te Ara Tupua, and we admired the Korokoro stream as we wandered across the inanga spawning habitat at the mouth there. Any questions from councillors for Tamsin? Councillor Connolly.
Just warming up. Thank you. Do you have you done any water quality testing, and what are the results? And are you seeing the impact of grazing at the headwaters affecting freshwater lower down the stream?
I'm not a scientist. We have done 3 rounds of water monitoring. We're waiting for the 4th set of results. My understanding is that it generally shows very low E. coli, which is typically an indicator of stock and human interference. Our sampling sites are in the lower parts of the stream. The values currently are very low of E. coli, so we're not seeing, I guess, direct, shit in the water, sorry for my language, in what we've sampled, but our highest sampling site is at Stratton Street rather than further up into the grazed area. So yeah, that's what we know so far, and we're certainly advocating to kind of keep those pristine values.
Thank you, Councillor, for the concise question, and Tamsin for the concise answer. Any further questions from councillors? Councillor Rhodes.
I'm just wondering how big a project do you think the regeneration project is that you're looking for?
It's massive. I mean, from what we've seen of the wider park, it is a really large project. I know our community is keen to be involved in it, and we do see it as a generational change as opposed to something that will be instantaneous. Yeah.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, then thank you very much for your time, Tamsin. Could you just turn that microphone off with the right-hand button? Because our next public presenter is Robin Smith, who is online. Can you hear me, Robin? And are you able to turn your video and microphone on to speak to us?
Yeah. I'm not sure how to turn my video on. Sorry. Where is it?
We can hear you.
Maybe there.
We can hear you. So
Okay.
please proceed.
Can you see me? No. Sorry. Oh, there we go. Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. Sorry. So I just wanted to throw a few things into the mix because I have been working in restoration planting for about 25 years, and 20 of those have been in Whitireia. There's quite a lot of similarities between Whitireia and Belmont Regional Park, even though Belmont's a lot more inland, it's still really subject to salt wind, as we know the winds blow pretty strong here in Wellington. So it's dry. The similarities are that it's dry and it's got very little topsoil. It's very exposed. So our restoration plantings in Whitireia are very successful, and that's due to the species choice and how we go about it. And so I totally agree with how the plan for Belmont is being set down by planting more sheltered sides of valleys, using assisted natural regeneration. This is the sort of things that we have been doing at Whitireia, which are very successful. We have very high success of our plants, and on the more difficult slopes, we still plant them, but they take longer to take off. They sit there for about 3 years and then suddenly decide to grow after that. But so the other thing I would like to point out is that this restoration planting and retirement gradually from grazing will be very beneficial to Te Awaroa or Porirua. we see the effects of grazing in the harbour. There's a lot of slips. We're having much more bigger rain events happening. Every time there's a big rain event, Belmont Regional Park contributes significantly to sedimentation of streams and the harbour, because most of it flows that way. A lot of it flows that way. What else have I got there? One thing that happens through gorse succession to note is that you get a different succession as you would through Manuka succession. So we plant a lot of Manuka and Manuka, even though it's a high risk fire species, because the whole place is covered in gorse, basically. So there's a high risk of fire there anyway. So I don't think it really matters that you add a bit more to it, because you get a lot better succession. The dappled light that takes the seedlings underneath that come in with the birds is perfect. There's been some studies done, Sullivan in 2007 in the Journal of Ecology that talks about this, so I can send that in to anyone if they want it. The other thing is, if Manuka Kanuka are planted on spurs, they will naturally spread very quickly. With the wind, the wind dispersed, and when the spurs dry off in the summertime, the seed gets dispersed and they have time to germinate before the flush comes in the spring and autumn. So it works really well. What else have I got to say? Sorry, just looking at my notes. That's probably about it. Have you got any questions?
Thank you, Robin. Appreciated. Any questions from councillors for Robin Smith? There are none. Thank you for your time, Robin.
Okay.
Keep tuning in to our entertainment for the morning. A stiff coffee might be needed. Next on the order of speaking is Emily Mossman and Terry Joy from Pukeariki Pest Free, speaking on the same topic. If you can use the right-hand button to turn on the microphone, please. Do we have slides? If you could start speaking, we'll get the slides up as soon as we can. Okay. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou ngā kai konihira. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this paper today and our progress in the park. Ko Emily toka whenua, ko Te Joy ia. We're both very nervous people. We don't like public speaking. We'd rather be in the forest talking to the birds. So thank you for listening to us today. Pukeariki Pest Free is a volunteer pest trapping group in the Korokoro catchment of the Belmont Regional Park, specifically the key native ecosystem part of the park. And we'd like to speak to you today on our progress since Terry came to see you in 2023 with his plea for an extension of the trapping network into the upper catchment, where he had detected quite a few significant possum population. Sorry, is this the button here? Is it the green one? Yes. Okay. So since 2023, we've been really busy. Thank you to Greater Wellington for financing and resourcing the extension of the trap network up into the upper catchment. You can see it's quite significant now today. So we have been very busy. Sorry. Ooh. I'm going to try that, Terry. Oh, there we go. We have been applying for grants to get A2 to 220 traps out into the gullies. That's that automated trap there, in the areas that we can't visit very often because they're quite remote. We've been recruiting more volunteers. We've been going to hui's and engaging with rangatahi educators who are training the next generation of trappers in the area. We've been communicating and building relationships with your Greater Wellington staff and other community groups. We've been upskilling our techniques to become better trappers. We've been experimenting with lures, butchering rabbits for stoat bait, and of course we've been doing lots and lots of trapping. Here's our stats since the project started. That represents over 3,000 hours of sweat, gorse bashing, ongonga cutting and rotten carcass tossing. And we do a lot of monitoring of our data, and we have a very close monitor of how often our traps are checked, so we're quite confident that they are all being seen to. Thank you very much. So we love the park, we don't love the farm. And those 550 possums that you can see there in the stats, they've been caught since 2023, so there was a very significant population of possums. So we're in the park every week. We're very nosy. We notice a lot of pest plants. We notice illegal riders. We help gain lost dogs and detect goats and cat droppings, deer footprints. We notice stock damage in the waterways. We see broken fences, and where stock have escaped into the park. We are impacted by things like lamb closures and fences and gates and poor wet weather. As you can see there, the muddy footprints ankle deep that have been caused by the stock, and that impacts people, the public who are walking through our Pukeariki Traverse, much to our embarrassment. And given the way it is at the moment, with a significant rabbit population in any farm, we get stoat re-incursion into our fabulous forest, and we see the dreadful presence of a 1,000 hectare farm as it is today. We also notice the wonder of the park. We see kariria teaching their fledglings how to catch food. We see native seedlings coming up. We see native growth coming up under gorse. We see dead gorse plants rotting underneath a makui canopy after 30 years of regeneration. So we see every stage of that regeneration. We can see the proof that this process works. We've got the lush mature forest down by the dam, and then going all the way up to the top of Stratton Street, which has been retired for 30 years. You can see that in the picture there. It does go through the phases of gorse, yes, to the nursery, and then for generations in the future they will benefit, as you'll see from the picture of that lovely rimu in the lush dam end of the park.
Thank you, Emily. For closing comments, please.
So we don't have a petition of 1,000 names, but we've got evidence of thousands of hours of dedication to the park. We're stubborn, we're passionate, we're committed. We've got the energies and the resource to extend into a further 1,000 hectares of the park. And there can't be a single resident that doesn't want kiwi and kaka back on the hills. And it's not just us. You can see that there's many community groups in and around the park working with a relationship with Greater Wellington to reach that gain, and we're ready. Bring it on.
Thank you, Emily and Terry. Any questions for Emily and Terry? There are none. Thank you very much for coming in today. Next speaker is Kina Daignan from Ngāhere Korowai Collective, speaking on the same item. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, tēnā tātou katoa. Thank you for the chance to speak. I just wanted to start by wina mihi to that group that brought the petition. That's a lot of community organising, and just wina mihi to you guys. We're not speaking in opposition to that, but we're just bringing a different view from a different community. So I'm Kina Daignan. I'm the Innovation Lead at Wesley Community Action, and I have been deputised by our community members in Porirua East to speak today. I can understand why they deputised me now, because it's a bit scary being up here with you all. I'm here to speak in support of the plan to restore Belmont Regional Park. I'm going to share with you our vision for Ngāhere Korowai, just so that you can make your decisions knowing how your plan for management supports the community's vision in Porirua East. The key message that I really want you to take away from this is that the whānaus and community of Porirua East deserve and want a healthy local environment, and we have to work in a way that uplifts their mana and leadership in that process. So Ngāhere Korowai is a collective impact project that's grown straight out of Porirua East community. Our vision is that Ngāhere Korowai grows the leadership of our Porirua East community to take care of our ngāhere, our water, our harbour. In 50 years, everyone in our community will be living in connection with Te Taiao, able to gather our kai, our rongoa, and leaving a legacy of kaitiakitanga for our mokopuna to continue ake. Ngāhere Korowai isn't just about reforesting an area, which you're talking about today. It's an ecological justice initiative to rekindle the relationship between people and nature and to grow the community voice to lead positive change. We're working to restore the hills and waterways surrounding Porirua East back to a rich ecosystem where community members can harvest kai and rongoa sustainably and the hills, awa and harbour are thriving with life. This vision was sparked by a visit to Zealandia hosted by Therese McLeod, where our men's group asked, why do they get Zealandia in Karori and we get bare hills and dirty water? Why can't we have that too? The answer came that we can, and the community can lead that. Ngāhere Korowai is a collective impact project to focus all of the different organisations and individuals' efforts and collaborate to bringing that vision to life. Greater Wellington are part of this collective. Your kaimahi are at all of our collective hui and support our work. And we're all learning together about how to work in partnership to achieve each of our separate goals as organisations in whānau, but work together on this shared vision. We're working to uplift local residents as the priority, amplifying their valuable voices and insights and their imaginations and their capacity to contribute. Ngāhere Korowai supports the tino rangatiratanga of Ngāti Toa Rangatira to achieve their aspirations in this rohi as well. The collective is facilitated by Wesley Community Action because it aligns with our vision of local community healing and community leadership. Your Greater Wellington kaimahi have been active in the collective since we began, working out how to work in ways that bring up the aspirations and expertise of whānau and communities who have too often been kept at the margins of conservation work. Your teams have been planting the bulk of the trees in Porirua East, so the western side of the park, but we call it Porirua East, by working in relationship with Ngāhere Korowai. Whānau from Porirua East are seeing their own leadership in that making of that positive change. So I'm here to represent the group that wants to support the restoration of the park. An additional thought from us that we want to contribute to thinking about your plan is the how of you do the engagement with communities like Porirua East. We want to see the staff at Greater Wellington be able to be well resourced and supported to be able to work in partnership with local community in the management of this really important resource. These hills are the ones that the tamariki of Porirua East see out their windows every morning. And how are we going to make sure that they know that it's their land to connect to and that they have an ability and strength to care for it as well, and that they are able to make huge changes for their own communities? So that would be one thing that we would like you to consider. Kia ora.
Thank you for your words this morning, Kina. Any questions from councillors? There are none. Appreciate you taking the time to come in. Next on the list is a written statement provided from the Guardians of Pāwatahanui Inlet. And do Councillor Johnstone or Councillor Rhodes have that to hand and like to read that out? Okay. I will read it out then. Your voices would be much more sonorous, but okay. Can I forward it to you right now? Will that work? There it is in your inbox. Microphone, please.
Good morning, Quentin. Thank you for your email of 23 February. GOPI appreciates the opportunity to provide comments on the Belmont Regional Park restoration implementation and grazing requirements for 2030 paper. Unfortunately, we're unable to attend tomorrow's meeting in person, but provide the following comments. GOPI supports the Belmont Regional Park long-term strategy with a key direction comprising a transition from farming to a focus on restoration and the ecosystem health. We note that due to constraints, restoration is expected to take 10 years following a staged program of activity with the current focus on the first 4 years to 2030. We support the environmental drivers outlined in paragraph 17 as being the progressive reduction of grazable area, low stocking rates, and full exclusion of stock from all waterways, wetlands, regenerating native vegetation, and high-value ecological or cultural sites. The master planning consideration detailed in paragraph 26 are also supported, in particular targeting erosion-prone areas and upper catchments to reduce sediment entering waterways, particularly towards Porirua Harbour. To provide context for our support, we note that recent sedimentation levels in the Pauatahanui Inlet have been significant and above the target objectives proposed by GWRC. Dr. Melodonus' Statement of Reply Evidence 14 May 2025 to the Heritage Panels on PC1. In addition, Table 11 in the Te Araroa o Porirua Implementation Program highlights that sedimentation load from Lower and Upper Duck Creek is the third highest in all catchments entering the inlet after Pauatahanui and Horakiri and Motukaraka. For the ecological health of the inlet, there is an imperative to reduce the sediment load from Duck Creek. Figure 1 of the Restoration Implementation and Grazing Plan highlights the current proposed restoration areas, which we consider should reduce levels of sedimentation levels from a significant source entering the Pauatahanui Inlet via Duck Creek. In summary, GOPI is very supportive of GWRC's proposal to prioritise retirement and restoration of the Porirua side catchments in order to reduce sedimentation of Ngā Awarai o Porirua. Grenville Gaskell.
Thank you, Councillor Johnstone. When we receive a written statement as public participation, we simply read it out and there are no commentary or questions. Moving on to the next and final item of public participation on a different topic, to exercise your minds. We have Corinna Jordan from New Zealand Fish and Game online, I believe. Corinna, can you hear us? We can see you, and I think we can hear you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So am I coming through all right?
You are. We can hear you loud and clear. Speaking
Brilliant.
Avian influenza item.
Thanks for your opportunity to come and talk to you today about high-path avian influenza. I will just give a bit of a summary from Fish and Game's perspective around the risk of high-path avian influenza into our game birds. I suppose my ask is going to be a collaborative working environment where we create combined communications and engagement plans on the risk of high-path avian influenza entering New Zealand, and have a emergency response plan in place for when it does arrive here. So I'm just letting you know that's going to be my ask at the end. But anyway, so high-path avian influenza or bird flu, so viral disease of birds. I'm picking that you know this already, and it's spreading globally. It hasn't reached Australia or New Zealand yet, but it is getting really close. So we understand that the closest it is at the moment is in Heard Island in Australia. And so that's sort of halfway between essentially Africa and Australia. And MPI considers that it's high risk to New Zealand, and it's not a matter of if it reaches New Zealand, it's just a matter of when. And the peak periods of time we were most concerned are sort of the spring and summer migratory periods for our birds. So it's likely to reach our shores via migrating birds, but it also is in internationally in our marine mammal populations as well. MPI is the lead agency for bird flu response in New Zealand, so they'll be leading it, and we're working closely with them to keep an eye on the risk status, where it is in relation to its proximity to New Zealand, and then what the responses are going to be. We understand at this stage from MPI that once it's in New Zealand, it won't be able to be eradicated. And so the response will just be to try and, as much as possible, isolate those animal communities that are affected. There might be restrictions put in place in relation to human engagement with those animals, but essentially just to let the virus play out. We have had a couple of, and I can talk more about the viruses, but if I can just give you an example of how we think that is going to look in New Zealand. We have a number of botulism outbreaks in New Zealand each year, and those are increasing. And you'll be well aware of what botulism is and its risks. So we had this year, we had an outbreak in the Hawke's Bay. And so what we see when we have a botulism outbreak essentially is a mass mortality of birds, Indigenous and game birds. And what we also witness is the community response to an outbreak. And so while MPI is indicating that humans should stay away from these areas, we should isolate and leave the animals alone. My experience would indicate that there are going to be situations where we're going to have to contain the area, try and restrict human traffic from that area and clean up these birds. And our experience so far with botulism is that councils aren't really well prepared in the event of an outbreak. So to date, in relation to the botulism outbreaks we've seen in multiple parts of New Zealand, Fish and Game's essentially created or been the lead agency in that response. And so what I think we need to do is work more closely together and have a bit of a response plan in place, and also be aware of MPI as the lead agency and their directions, but also understand that in the event of an outbreak, especially where it's in a close proximity to a urban centre, there probably will be a need to send in crews to remove those animals. So we'll need disposal facilities and essentially a joined-up response in place. Also, what we know is that the communications and engagement is going to be really, really important with our communities. It's obviously it's quite a devastating. It's likely to be devastating what we see with those botulism outbreaks. I'm not sure if you're aware of the Whangamarino outbreak that I think we had about 3 years ago, Blackwater event in the Whangamarino wetland up in the Waikato region. Over 2,000 birds died in that event. And it caused, essentially, created it was a global story and was really concerning for those communities living around that area and for the hunters to sort of witness that event. And so we're anticipating that when avian influenza, the high-path avian influenza finally gets here, we'll have those sort of mass mortality events and that community wanting to engage with them, wanting to know what to do about it and wanting to essentially help. So coordination of that is going to be super important. I might just pause there because I'm picking that you know a lot about HPAI anyway, and so I think probably spending a bit of time with a bit of a Q&A might be useful to you, so I can answer any questions that you might have around what Fish and Game is doing in this area. If I just can preempt, so probably what we'll be doing is we'll probably be changing game bird regulations if it hits us. We will probably be closing our game bird season in certain areas. That's only to just provide those game birds with the best possible chance of survival from the virus. I mean, we're expecting mortalities to be up there around the 90%, so massive. So just give any of those birds that are able to survive it the best opportunity to survive it, and also stop moving those birds around, so just let them sit. And so there were regulation changes last year that got put through to enable the minister to change game bird regulations ahead of a season to enable us to do that. And we're working with each of our fish and game regions at the moment to make sure they've got a template in place so they can rapidly change game bird seasons if an event happens. And we're also keeping our regions updated. So we do regular webinars. We've got policy on the approach. We've got a communications and engagement plan in place that we keep reviewing, and we've trained all of our regions on the use of PPE gear in the event of an outbreak and what approaches to take.
Thank you, Corinna. Much appreciated. This is also a paper on the agenda, so councillors have an opportunity to ask you questions now, and then also a chance to ask officers questions later. So are there any questions for Corinna? Yes, we have a question from Councillor Johnston.
I know these are not game birds, but what action has been taken from commercial chicken farmers? Because I also understand that that's quite a risk and obviously an economic risk.
That's right. So MPI is working, has prioritised working with our poultry farms to get them ready for a high path avian influenza outbreak. Now, we had an example, I think it was last year, it was an Otago poultry farm had a high path avian outbreak. So low path avian influenza is predominant in our bird populations in New Zealand. It's been, we think it's been here for since before humans arrived. And what happened with the Otago farm is it looks like there was a mutation event from low path avian influenza into high path avian influenza. So this is not the same virus that we're worried about entering New Zealand, which is H5N1. This is it was an H7, I think. I'll just grab that for you to make sure I've got my strains right. And anyway, what happened with that event is that poultry farm was isolated, and then the birds were disposed of. So serious response, quarantine, and then full eradication of those birds on that farm. And also what we saw within that was the response of those with those poultry farmers. So I think what MPI is doing is currently encouraging our poultry farmers to think about what they're going to do in the event of a high path avian influenza outbreak or an incursion into New Zealand, the ability to be able to isolate their poultry farms, putting in place measures for disposal of those birds should they become affected. But I think the biggest risk probably is to our free range birds. So in that event, in the likelihood of it entering our free range poultry industry, there's not too much we'll be able to do about that. I think MPI is trying to work with those farmers to change their systems so they can adjust in the event of this entering New Zealand. But one of the things that also happened with that Otago farm outbreak, and we've seen this with farmers across the country, is that they want to then start eradicating the wild birds from around those poultry farms, which is a real risk. And we're trying to work on education to let them know that that's not going to help them in the event that this enters New Zealand. They're not going to be able to eradicate all the wild birds, and while they might be wanting to focus on the game birds, it's likely to come into their properties from the likes of starlings and other birds that they can't control.
Thank you, Corinna. Any further questions from councillors? If there are none, appreciate your time joining us today, Corinna. And thank you, everyone. That brings to a close the public participation this morning, unless I've missed anyone. Oh, very good. So we now move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the Belmont Regional Park Restoration, Implementation and Grazing Requirements to 2030 paper. So we have officers joining us, Jack Mace and David Boone, to speak to the paper and answer your questions. So we'll start with, the floor is yours, officers, and then we'll take questions from councillors.
Morena koto, thanks for the introduction, Councillor Duffy. I'm happy to take the paper as read or to provide a brief summary, whatever you prefer.
Take.
I don't think options 1 and options 2 were particularly clear in the paper, and there appears to be. So I would appreciate it if you could give a summary that was clarified options 1 and 2.
And indeed, let's take it as read, and that can be the first question from Councillor Connolly, is to clarify exactly what options 1 and 2 are. Well, let's start with that question and then carry on with other questions from councillors. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I don't think I can clarify what options 1 and 2 are without starting with what recommendation 1 is. So I'll start there. Recommendation 1 is seeking your agreement that our restoration approach is consistent with Toitū Te Whenua, the Reserve Management Plan. So if recommendation 1 is agreed, that gives us 2 options of how we pursue that restoration approach. Noting that the options referred to in the paper are options for officer consideration. The process of implementing Toitū Te Whenua, proceeding towards the implementation of a restoration plan and associated grazing licenses are all delegated to officers to manage that portfolio of work. So we are not referring to those as options for the committee to decide upon. They are options for the staff the staff are considering. We're seeking the committee feedback. That's really important to be clear on that.
I don't know that is consistent with previous council decisions that were made in June of last year.
The decision at last year was at Environment Committee, who did not have decision-making power over the matters at hand.
Well, they still
So just elaborate, please, on that and a bit of background. So we have the management plan a few years ago. We have a decision of the Environment Committee last year. Could you just explain those steps to answer Councillor Connolly's question, and then we'll move to another person on the questioning list. Thank you.
Yeah, it'd be helpful to have Francis Ryan here to explain this, but he's not, so I'll do my best, but maybe better to follow in writing. The Council decided on the Toitū Te Whenua plan, and the delegation is to officers to oversee that, including assessing, deciding on grazing licences and the program of restoration. And Environment Committee have an advice and recommendation role per the terms of reference. They don't have a decision-making role. So Council can direct us to reconsider the plan, and they may lift management delegations off us, which would be unusual. The reconsideration of a plan would be if you rejected recommendation 1, deemed that our following was not in accord with the plan, or that the plan was on accord with the direction Council wanted to give, at which point we would go away and give some advice on what options were for Council to redirect us or reconsider review the plan in accord with legislation.
Thank you. I'm not sure that'll be entirely clear to everyone, but you can fashion your questions to elaborate further. Councillor Freeze next. Don't wave your hand if you would like to be on the speaking list.
Point of order. I don't actually think Councillor Connolly's question has been answered around the options. Is that correct?
No.
I didn't hear an answer. So I think we need to do that before we move on. Also, I'd like to ask, at what point were we informed as a council or as a committee that we didn't have the delegations that we're now being told we didn't in June?
Thank you, Councillor Gaylor. Would you like to try again to respond to the question?
The question around the options, or the questions around the consideration of the options being the committee or officers?
Both.
Okay, I'll try again on the question of the options and the decision being with the committee or with officers. My understanding is, and essentially I'm repeating what Jack has said, that the Environment Committee, when they gave the direction in July last year for the grazing license to come back to Environment Committee, they didn't have the authority to do that. That would have had to go to Council to either revise the delegations or to revise the management plan. So it was an administrative error of the Environment Committee in July.
Following on from Penny's question, when were we alerted to the fact that the Environment Committee had overstepped its mark? Now is essentially what you're telling us.
Yeah, we came to that conclusion in the preparation of this paper.
So I don't think that's really in keeping with the spirit in which that resolution was passed, and I take your process points, but nevertheless the committee had a desire, where there was no master plan in place, which there still isn't, to be more across grazing licence decisions, recognising that that the master plan was supposed to, we're putting the cart before the horse, and the master plan was supposed to work through a lot of this detail, and that hasn't happened. And so I think the desire from the committee was to be across the grazing licences in the instances where master planning had not been sought through, as is the case.
So to turn that into a question, can you comment on the cart before the horse aspect of today's decision?
First, let me say I accept that, Councillor Connolly, and we apologise for that. It wasn't the intent, and the intent of this paper is in fact to give that clarity around the grazing licence and the options there too. Definitely acknowledge and apologise for the fact that we did not come back to Council or to Environment Committee once we discovered that that decision was made in error. So that's on us.
And point of order, I think, is the only way I know how to do this, is that having discovered that, did you then discuss that with a chair or the chair, and then look to see if you could have
Councillor Gaylor, is that a point of order or a question to officers?
Yeah. Like, is it? Did you actually action?
I'm not hearing the point of order, Councillor Gaylor. So try and fashion that into a question for officers. We'll just go back to the speaking list. Councillor Free, please.
I can respond to the question that I think I heard in Councillor Gaylor's comments. Yes, we did approach the chair on that, the clarity of the decision making, and the paper we presented to you today, the conversation we're having right now, we feel we're following through on the intent of what the Environment Committee interest was. The Environment Committee giving us the instruction to present a future grazing license for the committee to approve. That's essentially what we're doing today. It's a technicality that officers have the delegation to issue a grazing license. We are seeking your feedback into that process and the consideration of the restoration plan that supports a grazing license before we carry on and exercise our delegation to issue a grazing license. So we're not taking away the intent at all of the Environment Committee saying, come back to us before a grazing license is issued. That's what we're doing right now.
Thank you. Councillor Free, question.
Yes, and options 1 and 2, I'm getting to. Yeah. Shall I do those now? Okay. Unfortunately, the previous conversation has made my computer go to sleep. Sorry, I had my own notes and summary. Here we go. Excuse me. So, option 1 is confirming that officers will proceed implementing the 4-year restoration plan and the associated grazing license. A quick rundown of what the 4-year restoration plan entails. It's an initial retirement of about 300 hectares of land from grazing, and then subsequent retirement of grazing of around 100 hectares per year in years 2, 3, and 4. So that will end up with a total retirement area of around 600 hectares. We're not 100% sure what that looks like over time, but it's in that vicinity. This was in consideration with the work towards park restoration being the priority. It also supports Greater Wellington's emission reduction targets. And there is flexibility in that progressive retirement in years 2, 3, and 4. We can discuss that today. The option 2 referred to says that we could pause future restoration work and a retirement of grazing and focus on the completion of master plans first. That is the reason that option 1 is preferred by officers. If we pause restoration and grazing retirement, we've done our best to lay out the implications of that in option 2, but I'll try to summarize them here. If the master planning process proceeds with the intent that park restoration is the priority and we should utilize grazing only where necessary, we will end up with the restoration plan that we're putting forward, which is the retirement of Korokoro catchment, which was discussed earlier today, Speedy Stream, sensitive water bodies, Porirua Harbor. That's exactly what's in the initial sort of 300 hectare retirement area that we're proposing. Alternatively, if we proceed down a master planning process where it's questionable whether we are seeking to prioritize park restoration or to retain farming, we will probably end up in a position where we cannot navigate our way through master planning, questioning that higher direction of the management plan, which will eventually lead us to the point of an impasse with the master planning community process and the need to review the management plan or come back to you and re-clarify, is restoration or retaining farming the ultimate priority in the park. The way that we're currently interpreting it, going back to recommendation 1, we are reading Toitu Te Whenua as saying park restoration trumps farming in the park. Only use farming where absolutely necessary. That's the direction we're heading.
So just add, it's important to understand the statutory context within which we manage parks. So we have Belmont Regional Park is managed under the Reserves Act 1977. Section 17 of that outlines the purpose of recreation reserves. And amongst other things, it specifies that they're there for open recreation. It does include the preservation of open spaces for recreation, the preservation of beauty of the landscape. But it also specifies that we're compatible with the primary purpose. The soil, water and forest conservation values of the reserve are maintained and restored. As an administering body under the Act, we are required to prepare a management plan that outlines how we'll manage that, and any decisions on how we manage the park then have to be consistent back with that plan. Any decisions that we would make on a lease or license that were in contravention of that plan would be unlawful. So because Toitu Te Whenua was issued as the park's management plan, we are bound by law, as would council be, in any decisions to follow the provisions of that Act. We have not done a full analysis of the, bring back 1,000 hectares of grazing, but our initial advice is that it's very unlikely that would be consistent with the Act, and would be very unlikely that would be a lawful decision under the current plan. Therefore, if councillors wish to direct us in a different direction in terms of the future of the park, away from the restoration principles and retirement of grazing that are in there, towards its future as a farm park like Battle Hill, our initial advice would be that would probably require a review of the management plan, which involves public consultation, hearings, and is quite a significant proceeding. So that is an option that council could exercise. And if you did not like either of these options, you could direct us to come back with advice to a future council meeting on that effect.
Thank you. I think we've got somewhat to the bottom of those questions, but it won't entirely be clear, so they're clear. So there are more questions. So next on the speaking order is Councillor Free, and then Councillor Johnstone, and then Councillor Gaylor.
Thank you. So, would this committee, which isn't council, have the authority to not agree with this decision and to direct you to do something else? Because I'm now confused about how much authority this committee actually has.
Through the chair. My understanding would be if you do not support recommendation 1, then we would have to come back with a future paper to council to give us direction on, do we amend the reserve management plan, or what, or are we embarking then on a process to change Toitu Te Whenua?
I've got another question. Thank you for that. Is there an option to just retire the 300 hectares and forget about, or postpone the other 100, 100 and 100? Would that be consistent, although a bit slower with the plan?
Very good question. The flexibility to do exactly that is in the existing 4-year restoration plan and the design of the grazing license. The initial 300 is a combination of the simple language, the no-brainer retirement areas, and limiting how much we think we can handle operationally. That's where the 300 hectares is coming from. The additional approximate 100 hectares per year for years 2, 3, and 4 is pushing towards the Toitu Te Whenua guidance of maximize the restoration of the park. We could pause that and complete a master planning process. The flexibility is there. We are not locking ourselves into saying we absolutely will retire 100 hectares annually in years 2, 3, and 4, but that's the intent if we can. If there's further sensitive areas, if there's opportunities to retire erosion-prone land in the Porirua Harbour catchment, we can with the design of the grazing license.
Okay, and just one little question.
Councillor. If you could just hold that, we'll just carry on with the speaking order and then come back to you. Thank you. Councillor Johnstone next.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm really clear about something. A couple of things actually. So under the Reserves Act, right, that is a legal document, but we can ask you to review the decision, providing we agree that it will have to go back out to public consultation. Is that what you said, Jack?
Yeah, essentially the Act allows for the administering body to arrange for a review of the management plan. And there's a process outlined in the Reserves Act for that. So it's like any plan change type of thing.
And then that would allow us to have another look at the master plan or spatial plan.
No, the master planning and spatial planning exists. So the ability to do that exists within Toitu Te Whenua, and within that, it would be consistent with the way that the Act is written and the plan, that we would identify areas that would remain open as open spaces, and we could utilise grazing as a management tool to give effect to that. We could also identify areas that were surplus or not necessary for the recreation reserve that could still be grazed or farmed. So there's processes within that, but they are subservient to the overall direction with the plan, which points towards a retirement of grazing and restoration. And so if fundamentally the desire was not to slow down the pace of restoration or take a particular pathway, but it was to retain farming, then our advice would be we should go back and review the management plan and make that very clear, receive public submissions on that, and then council could make a decision and we would have clear direction. Because fundamentally I think the issue that's at hand is about the direction towards restoration into a natural forest or retention of a farmed area of hillside.
Or balance. My second question is actually around the lease, and I just want to know, we've heard a lot of talk about the lease in the community, some of which may be true, some not, but I read the lease document and I wondered just exactly how much advice you took from people that are very experienced grazers and farmers because some of it looked to me, as an ex-farmer and landowner, to be a little impractical. And I just really want to know where your advice came from. Did you work with people that actually know that land and worked with the land and thought about it from an economic perspective, if we're going to do any leasing at all? Because
Councillor,
it must, like I feel really keenly about making sure it's really practical, but also making sure that the welfare of our animals.
thank you,
It's good.
Councillor. Can I just clarify, are you referring to the licence? Because there's
Yeah,
not
I
a
am.
lease involved here. You're
Yeah,
talking
the
about
licence.
the
The
licence.
licence.
Are you referring to the licence that has just expired after 10 years,
Yeah,
or are
no.
you referring to the expression of interest
It's the expression
document that
it's-
sets out parameters
yeah.
for a new? So we're talking about the expression of interest
Yes,
document.
that's correct. Thank you.
you.
Sorry.
Officers, if you could address that question, please.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. The lease for farming and the particular requirements of
License.
farming operation. Thank you. Sorry, the license does not exist yet. The expression of interest was describing the intent of Greater Wellington wanting to work with a future grazier. And I can dispel any rumors that it's non-attractive to the farming sector. We had multiple responses to the expression of interest. We're currently going through a selection process to identify a preferred grazier. That selection process identifies what you might think of it as a preferred applicant. We think this grazier has the best potential to work with us to develop the particulars of a license. So in short, we're confident that we can work with a future grazier with practical means to allow them to run a farming operation and to maintain healthy livestock and implement best farm management practice and using grazing as a land management tool. And we have people we're currently working with to choose the best one.
So you have farming expertise helping you to make that choice.
But yes, we have a very well experienced environment restoration team that works with farmers on a daily basis. No, we do not have farmers on the staff.
Thank you. There are farming consultants, but thank you. You answered my question.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gaylor.
Lovely, thank you very much. So can I please ask, of the public participants that we've heard from today, who have you consulted with and who haven't you consulted with of the groups today?
I might have to pass to the staff that ran numerous workshops leading to the restoration plan development. Bear with me. Can Kelly or Jeremy answer that question? All but preserve Belmont. All but preserve Belmont, and I'll provide a bit of context into that. There has been no intentional effort to exclude Preserve Belmont Farm. However, they are coming from a position of retained farming in the park, which is counter to the management plan. So if we are engaging a community-led discussion around how should we approach restoration of the park, and we have a community group saying we don't want you to restore the park, those two things are a bit like oil and water. There's nothing preventing them from joining the Friends of Belmont. There's nothing preventing them from attending these public held workshops that we have held over the past few months.
Second question, Councillor Gaylor.
Are you aware, or is there any other staff member who is aware that is still in the employment here, that maybe 4 years ago we met with the group?
Last training.
I think it was training before. It was before the environmental group restructure, and it was Alcross, and I attended, and with some other managers from our organisation, met with them. I understand it. My recollection is the group, and we did commit to consulting with them. Is anybody in the room aware of that?
Yes, I was there, and the consultation through master planning is coming. If I can, through the chair, if I might add some clarity around what master planning is, that could help. The purpose of a master plan is much more than defining what areas of the park we're going to graze and what areas we're going to pursue restoration. It's more about the integration of all park uses. You might think of it as the overall land use is the base layer, and master planning needs to provide guidance on how other park users, experiences, mountain bikers, equestrians, walkers, etc., are going to move through the park and experience it. Where are we going to emphasize amenity developments, historic, cultural developments throughout the park? It's the integration tool to pull that all together. If we're going forward with master planning, thinking, are we trying to integrate all of those other park user experiences overlaid on a farm or overlaid on a restoration process? We can't move through the process. We're operating under the basis that we are pursuing master planting with the direction that we are working in a landscape we are trying to restore.
Thank you. Next we have Councillor Tupou, and then back to Councillor Free for another question.
Through the chair, can officers advise what the estimated time frame is to complete the full park master plan, including community engagement, drafting, consultation, for it to come back to the committee and then the final adoption? So how confident are officers in that estimated time frame?
Time frame we're currently operating under is early 2027. We're doing everything we can to pull that forward to the end of this calendar year. How confident we are in the time frame? Moderate, given complications, capacity limitations of Mana Whenua partnership. Experience has told us that working through these processes can't be done quickly.
Question 2, reading that there's a desire for Mana Whenua to participate in co-governance and the collaborative approach during this work. Have officers determined what that might look like during this process?
Just to summarize your question, what is the partnership approach with Mana Whenua with master planning?
This is just drawing attention to points 51 and 52 in the report, that it was clear the feedback of iwi representatives that there is a strong desire for co-governance and a collaborative approach to carrying out the restoration work in the park. Do we have any indication as to what that might look like, or obviously would that be still in the pipeline?
Oh, thank you. I think there's 2 points there. One, the first point we're making is that we understand quite clearly that our Mana Whenua partners are supportive of the restoration intent, not the retained farming direction. What the collaborative partnership looks like going forward, we've already held 2 field trips with both Mana Whenua partners, Te Ranaki Whanui and Ngāti Toa, touring the park, and we are in the co-design process of what that the planning steps look like between now and the end of the calendar year to land a completed master plan. And generally speaking, the partnership is working really well at the moment. We've been through a very similar process with Ngāti Toa at Queen Elizabeth Park, and we're relaying that process with a few changes to speed the process up. We're transferring that process to Belmont. So Ngāti Toa is very familiar. Te Ranaki Whanui is very supportive.
Thank you. We're Councillor Elder, and then moving to Councillor Free and Councillor Johnson.
This has been framed very much as a binary choice: either do restoration and stop grazing, or stop restoration work and carry on with the grazing. Is there scope for a third option where, given the size of the park, 3,500 hectares, we're only talking about 1,000 hectares of grazing, that regeneration and grazing can continue together, albeit with regeneration on a much smaller, affordable, practical scale?
I think the option certainly is there. I would say that that is contrary to the direction of Toitu Te Whenua, and that's what we're seeking your agreement for today. Toitu Te Whenua is not setting out that we retain a portion of a farm park and restore some of the park. It is saying restore the whole park. And where absolutely necessary, rely on grazing as a land management tool, but don't do that unless you have to.
I'll just add to that the plan does expire currently in 2030. And so we're mapping out 4 years until then, and we'll progressively retire and restore a portion of the park before then, and then council and the community will have another option to provide guidance. Generally speaking, for restoration, long-term generational change was used by one of the speakers, and that's true. But there are examples elsewhere in Wellington of hillsides where natural forest regeneration, soil conservation, water conservation has been allowed, and then grazing has been used to maintain open tops for preservation of beauty, views, and recreation opportunities. And so through master planning and then subsequently through Toitu Te Whenua, there may be opportunities to essentially find a middle ground between the two.
Thank you. The question list is growing, so giving priority to those who haven't asked a question yet. We'll have Councillor Staples and then Councillor Rhodes, and then we'll return to Free and Johnstone.
Thank you. Is it your understanding, please, that grazing is farming? Because we seem to be mixing these two up as if there's something different, and I can't imagine anybody is going to put a whole bunch of animals out there and just let them run around for the fun of it. They will be farming them. So is that your understanding that grazing is farming?
In the Reserve Act, the two are separated out as distinct activities. And so grazing can be used as a management tool, like specifically animals can be brought into crop grass. It's anticipated in the reserve, things like managing golf courses or rural rugby grounds. And so grazing is a component of farming activity, but the Act does anticipate them being separate.
It was Councillor Rhodes next.
Yeah, I once owned a large block of land with a lot of gorse on it, and it was the most dispiriting and expensive thing I've ever encountered and attempted in my life. And so I've got no support for growing gorse on Belmont Park. But my question is, given your current trajectory with the granting of the grazing licence, if the council decides to change the management plan or go down that path, what's the impact on your grazing licence issuing? You know, does that cause a halt to it, or can you continue on with modifications? Or
I think we would have to come back to you with further advice on that. The utilization of grazing at the moment, we are dependent on it as a land management tool, and what we're putting forward to you is a pursuit of the restoration intent. If we were to pause, then the implications of that, the gorse coming up and the difficulty in going backwards to returning to a farming operation would be difficult. I guess the key unknown in there is how long the duration of the pause would be.
Thank you. I'm just going to interject with a supplementary on the same topic. Do you think, what would be your advice on issuing a grazing licence today, similar to the one that has been in place? Would that be consistent with the Reserves Act and Toitu Te Whenua?
1,000 hectare grazing licence? My advice would be that it's inconsistent on the basis that there are areas in the park that should be restored from an ecological sensitivity point of view, receive an environment of Puerto to a harbour. We have the resources to actively restore a significant area of land. The current management plan is telling us to restore the park. So issuing 1,000 hectare grazing license and continuing what was put in place in 2016 prior to the management plan's existence, I would say is inconsistent.
Thank you. So moving to Councillor Free, then Johnstone, then Connolly.
It's really interesting to consider the options. Would it be more attractive to lease, to have a lease with a fixed amount for a certain period of time rather than a lease which is reducing incrementally every year, just from a commercial point of view?
I probably can't answer that without I'd be speaking on behalf of the future grazier and their interest in running a grazing / farming operation. I can say with confidence that we are working with multiple interested parties that are well aware of the intent to have further reductions. Would it be more attractive if that was fixed over 5 years?
So
probably.
Can I just?
I have another. Oh, sure.
I just want to add. The approach that's outlined in the Act and the approach that's outlined in the plan is that we're using grazing as a tool for managing the reserve for recreation purposes. So considerations around the viability or otherwise of the commercial benefit of farming are not considerations that we take into account. They're considerations of applicants for the licence. If we're unable to get a successful licensee or a credible one, then we may need to go back and review the commercials to make it more attractive so that we can secure that management tool. But what we're not doing is establishing and running a commercial farm or enabling that. That's not the purpose of the Act. That's the grazier or successful grazier, what they need to establish for themselves. Through the process of working with preferred applicants on the grazing, they may come back with counter conditions or discussion around the potential licence to make it viable for them. And we will take those into consideration because our purpose at the moment is to seek to retain grazing within areas of the park to support reduction of fire risk, to allow for stage restoration in a more affordable manner, and to allow for the preservation of open spaces and recreational opportunities. So that's what we have to look at. The commercials are for the other party and then for us to negotiate and agree.
Yeah, actually that was really clear, thank you. But one more question is, I think we've got a 7% reduction, or there's some sort of reduction in our budget for managing this. And I guess you can't go past the fact that this we've got money to spend and we have to consider that. Are we going to be pushing too much to get ambitious about, the speed at which we can retire things if we've actually got a budgetary constraints, and we might just end up with a poorly managed retreat away from grazing? What's the risk?
The cost savings proposal that's currently in consideration, the 7%, was taken into account with the restoration description that's in this paper. We are making no mistake about it. We're being quite clear that we are actively restoring around 20% of the area of Belmont, relying on that natural succession process. There's a lot of different opinions on the appropriate of that, the effectiveness of that. It is shown throughout the Wellington region that gorse is a successful nurse crop, and eventually the gorse will get out competed. So your question of, is it putting pressure on the budget? No, we are sticking to what we said we can do in the 20% area that we will actively restore, with relying on natural processes for the other 80%.
Thank you, councillors. We are reaching the sort of a natural point of needing to move along, but we have Councillor Johnstone and Connolly with a further question. And then I suggest we draw questions to a close. We take a 5-minute break and then come back and have the debate.
I've got two very different questions. Firstly, on gorse. My understanding is gorse is classified as a noxious weed. We have a regional pest management plan. We also have to adhere to the Biosecurity Act. Gorse spreads, and it spreads very readily, and you have positioned that well as being an advantage, but it also potentially makes us a very poor neighbour, and a neighbour that's going to cause problems with others. So my first question is, are we laying ourselves open to legal action to be taken against us, or have you got some means to ensure that our neighbours cannot do that? Because we're asking our neighbours to look after their land, to not have noxious weeds, and yet we're going to be a nursery for it.
So I can answer this. Gorses and noxious weeds are considered under the Regional Pest Management Plan. There aren't obligations on landowners to control gorse across the landscape. And if you travel, as you know, through the landscape of Wellington, Hutt, Wairarapa and Porirua, Kapiti, you'll see extensive hillsides, both private and public, covered in gorse in various stages of regeneration. Good neighbour rules do apply. And that in some regions can mean you have to keep a setback from the boundary, but I'm not aware of any region in New Zealand that requires landowners to comprehensively control gorse across their land. It's too well established as a weed. It's not economic for private landowners or public landowners to do it. We do abide by good neighbour rules, and we have a pest plants team who are very, very well versed in the legislation and rules around unwanted organisms and noxious plants.
Thank you for that answer. I'm taking into account what Paul Nation has said, and I think that they could be very concerned. The second one I just want to pick you up on is at some stage today you said that because Belmont Farm is set on the Belmont Farm thing, it really wasn't possible that for us to take into account what they're saying. And so I'm, as a new councillor, interpreting that to mean that if a group disagrees with council or council officers, that we shouldn't include them in our consultation because it seems contrary to what they're saying. And a lot of the things that I think work is when you reach a negotiated agreement and you're inclusive, not exclusive. And so I just wondered how you intend to actually bring people on board if they're excluded.
Thank you. Got a comment on that, please?
Yeah, the clarity and direction from today's consideration of this paper will help. At the moment, we are pursuing that pathway of restoration in the park. If there are members of the community that don't want to restore the park, it is very difficult to have a conversation with them about how we're restoring the park.
I'm sorry, I'm going to pick up on that.
Yeah,
that is an assumption.
I'll take that up. So, I mean, there is no stated desire to not restore the park. It's much more nuanced than that. But isn't that the purpose of master planning, is to
Absolutely.
have conversations about what restoring the park might look like to different groups and individuals and find that common ground?
Yes,
Is that
yes. And
part of the answer?
There has been no formal consultation today. In a sense of putting a proposal for a master plan out there and consulting upon that, we haven't done that yet. We have had workshops on what does a restoration plan look like, and we haven't included Preserve Belmont Farm in those conversations of designing the restoration plan.
So just to answer as well, we are open to voices that disagree with us, and we expect councillors also to challenge us on that. And so we can commit that, yes, through the plan of actual master planning, we will consult with Preserve Belmont and take their views into account insofar as they are in keeping with the reserves movement.
Thank you, Councillor Connolly, and then we'll take a break.
Lucky last. So I just wanted to tease out Councillor Duthie's question a little bit more. What volume, so if we said that the current licence was kind of our starting point, what volume, I don't know whether that's the right metric, of the current licence would we actually be looking to replant the high priority areas in the next 3 or 4 years?
Is the question how much area of land we're going to actively plant in the next few years?
Well, so we've talked a lot about our desire to replant Belmont, and I still agree with the desires expressed in Toi Tuta Whenua to replant gradually over time and reduce farming. But we have not really advanced at the rate that we thought we might at one stage. So from a practical perspective, how much of the current licence can we realistically replant in the next 3 or 4 years?
Just to clarify, Councillor Connolly, do you literally mean plant, or do you mean restore through a variety of methods, including planting?
I think I mean plant. I think because you've identified some high priority areas, but surely we would want to actually, because they're high priority, we would want to fast track their regeneration by actually planting in those areas.
Okay.
The paper describes approximately 20 hectares annually over the 4-year period of 2026 to 2030 restoration plan. There will be about 80 hectares of planted land and 520 hectares of naturally regenerated land.
So that's 80 hectares out of 1,000.
Yeah, that's targeting the areas that we think the planting is most useful or necessary for restoration using natural regeneration elsewhere. As we heard from one of the submitters from Preserve Belmont,
so I guess
planting is expensive.
Could we retain the current licence minus the 80 hectares that we are actually actively going to replant, and then in the rest of the park prioritise our rewilding things, which overall would be keeping us in the direction of Toitū Whenua, which is overall replanting.
What would be the intent of retaining the maximum amount of grazing land?
Well, practicality, the fact that we don't really have the resources to do anything more with it anyway, and the fact that we haven't got the master planning done in a timely fashion, and we will definitely have the master planning done over the next 3 or 4 years if we extend the grazing for that period.
So our advice is that the most practical pathway to restoration will be to progressively retire through natural retirement large areas with the use of planting in strategically targeted areas within that. We believe that's the best pathway to get towards a restored park as per Toitū Whenua. We believe that retaining large areas of grazing and planting only small areas is not as effective as that. That's our advice.
And just to clarify, is that advice based on local experience and evidence? And also, is there an element to which fence lines come into play here? Because you might ideally want to just protect a gully head, for example, but in order to do that and graze around it, you would have to build a fence around it. And so it becomes a question of economics as to how much fencing we are willing to invest in to divide up existing paddocks versus the economics of simply retiring the whole paddock, even though some of it is sensitive and some of it is not. Can you comment on those aspects?
Oh, absolutely. We're trying to avoid building new fences.
Because
of the cost and the potential for us to retire those paddocks at some point in the future and have redundant fencing.
And then in terms of the evidence of seeing the natural regeneration occur successfully in the vicinity of or within Belmont Regional Park, we know that this works.
Yes.
Okay, last chance to ask any questions. There are none, so let's draw questions to a close. That's been a fairly long start to the meeting. We'll take a 5-minute break, so this is not lunch. This is a toilet break. Quick cup of peppermint tea to soothe your nerves for me. And then we will look at the recommendations from officers and debate a resolution. 5 minutes, please, which literally means 11:58. All councillors are present and accounted for. Thank you. I hope you had a chance to grab a cup of tea, use the wharipaku, whatever you needed to do. We move from question time now into the substance of the matter, and as chair, I'd like to move the initial motion, which is based on the officer's recommendation with a suggested points of feedback from the committee, which will go up on the screen soon. Adrian, Councillor Stables has signalled, and I'll need to find a seconder for that. Councillor Stables has signalled she has an amendment to put, and so we will also consider that in a moment. So, do I have a seconder for? Well, I've got a seconder from Councillor James for. I can read it here, can't I? So I'm moving what is in our paper amended with the list of feedback. So what was circulated earlier. So it's agreeing that the proposed strategy in the paper, the proposed restoration plan in the paper, is consistent with Toitū Te Whenua and provides feedback to officers. And then there's a list of feedback there in relating to master planning and ensuring that everyone is included and that the process of master planning encourages groups to talk to each other and find a common ground. That the question of ongoing grazing in Belmont is a key focus for master planning. That we get that done as quickly as possible to come back to council. And that the the next grazing licence is on a collaborative basis to try and best facilitate the needs of a grazier and to enhance the values sought in the parks plan. That we defer any inessential fence removal in retired areas until the master plan has been completed. That staff prioritise good neighbour expectations around boundary weeds and fire risk. Otherwise, weed control across the area of retired areas is focused on those that are greatest risk to restoration, and that we support staff continue to support community predator control and nursery development. And we support the priority in the restoration plan given to erosion-prone Porirua Harbour catchments in light of the Porirua Harbour Accord, Te Waiora o Parirua, and working with mana whenua as staff are doing. Is that the end of it? There's a gap there, but I think that's the end. So that's a list of feedback that had some input from various councillors prior to the meeting. That is the initial motion, and it's seconded by Councillor James. I have spoken, so I'll consider that my speaking. Would you like to speak, Councillor James?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to acknowledge the frustration from councillors around what seems to be some hiccups in process, and also the fact some misdelegations and whatnot has caused issues. But I also want to acknowledge the speakers that came and spoke to us today. All were good and all had good points to raise, I think. I believe the motion as it is has the right balance to see us through the mastering planning process, which will actually decide the fate of Belmont. So, yes, that's it.
Thank you. Now, others can speak. Would you like to speak first, Councillor Staples, and propose your amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to propose an amendment, and I believe I have a seconder in Councillor Elder. If that could be put on the screen. So what I would like to say is that in the 9 years I've been on council, I have never felt as frustrated and angry as I did when I started to read this paper in front of us. Not because our staff are trying to do anything untoward, because they're not, and I acknowledge the work that they have put into this. However, the people that brought the petition to us today came to us 2 trienniums ago with 1,000 signatures or submissions, and said exactly the same thing, that they felt excluded and they felt that they had not been listened to in our Toi Te Whenua process. Now, that's our fault. For whatever reason, I don't know what reason it was, that they did not become fully engaged, but obviously they did not realise what the outcome of this process might be. And so I feel extremely embarrassed that we promised at the time that we would bring them into the tent and that they would be involved in the master planning process, which we have not done. And so now we are here with the process of having to renew a grazing licence, and our staff are only doing their job, providing due process. But we've skipped this bit that would have enabled these people who have come to us to share their frustrations. And I feel very sad about that. And now we end up with people that want to restore the park being pitted against people that want to retain some open space and grazing. And while they call themselves Preserve Belmont Farm Park, I do not believe that that has to be because they want farming to be the main reason. They want grazing that means they have open spaces and preserve some of those things that are so beautiful about that park. Things that I've known since I was a child. And I just, sitting here listening about gorse, the arguments about whether gorse is a nursery or it isn't a nursery. Yes, gorse is a nursery. I hate to admit this, but I'm probably one of the oldest people in the room and the only person that remembers the Eastern Hills being covered in yellow flowers and the fires that went with them. They are gorse burns. And it's not just gorse that we will end up with. We will end up with blackberry and old man's beard and blooming climbing asparagus and tradescantia and ivy and all those sorts of things that are not nursery plants. They actually block out the sun, and I just look at hills around me that have blackberry on them. So while the argument is that gorse is a nursery plant, it comes with risks. It certainly comes with a fire risk, and it's not just gorse that we will have on that land. So it needs to be managed. And for me, just allowing vast stretches of land to regenerate is, we're not being good kaitiaki. We are actually allowing land to turn into a wasteland. If we're going to restore that park, we need to do it properly. We need to do it in a manner in which we can see results, not have to wait 50 to 60 years for it. So I guess they're my thoughts. I feel sad that we're in this position. I don't like seeing members of the public pitted against one another. I think there is an opportunity with Belmont Regional Park for it to all fit together, and we have to take some of the responsibility that we did not put that in place first, and we have ended up in this situation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And then the petition, thank the petition.
Oh, yes, I would like to thank the people that brought the petition in. It was acknowledged the work that goes into organising something like that. We should not be dismissive of 2,000 signatures. We must be cognisant of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Elder is seconder of the motion. Would you like to speak?
Yes, I would first like to acknowledge the presentations we received this morning from the different interested parties, which is really good to hear that there is community enthusiasm from different angles. And I also fully want to endorse Councillor Staples' comments. I would just like to add the nuance that the scope, scale, and ambition of what's being proposed is frankly unrealistic and unaffordable, and we need to take a step back and come up with an option or a solution that is achievable. As a child growing up in the Wairarapa, I do remember seeing the hills of the Rimataka Road area covered in gorse, and that was 5 decades ago. Restoration, regeneration is a very slow, expensive process, and what's being proposed here over a 4-year time frame, I come back to unachievable, unrealistic. So we have to come up with a better option. I think the nuance of trying to separate grazing from farming is also impractical. You cannot have grazing that is not farming, because you're not going to get a leasee or a licensee turn up and just put sheep there for the social good. They have to get an economic return from what they're doing, and by progressively reducing the size of the land available to them, that's not going to fly. We have to give them a viable area in which to operate their grazing farming operation. So those are the main points I want to make. I think it's good to see there is a lot of passion around the table for this issue.
Thank you. Councillor Connolly, to speak to this amendment next, please indicate if you'd like to speak to the amendment.
I actually have 2 process questions. My first one is in relation to the petition. What is our process? Do we need to have a formal motion to receive the petition? And I don't know what DEM Services would say was the appropriate process following that.
So Lucas, if you could answer that first, please.
There is no motion needed for a petition. It's been received, and it's almost similar to public participation. So it's been received, and we can share the petition with members.
Notwithstanding that, I think a recommendation that acknowledged the fact that we have received the petition and thanked the people for their time and work and contribution would be appropriate.
I'd be more than happy to
add that. Okay.
Yes.
Do you want to comment any more and debate on the amendment?
The other thing I was just going to ask is, I know this is not a usual process, but is it possible to ask staff a question regarding the amendment, which is, do you think the amendment, so as I take it, Adrian's amendment, Councillor Staples' amendment, is all of Quentin's previous amendments plus that?
No.
No.
I think it's all of my initial motion deleted and replaced with Adrian's amendment.
Can we see them side by side or something? Because they're both pointing.
That sounds technically challenging.
But I guess, is recommendation 1 going to be there? I guess my question is what Councillor Staples is proposing consistent with recommendation 1? Is my question for staff.
Okay, so as chair, I would like to suggest we invite Officer back to the table to answer that question about the proposed amendment and how it relates to the Officer recommendation 1. Is it consistent with that or not?
And also, could I have some clarity from Councillor Staples as to what part of Quentin's recommendation she wanted to remain, if any?
Councillor Connolly, my thinking of the amendment basically is we have recommendation 1 and then my amendment.
Okay, thank you. Would the committee like to hear advice from officers on the amendment in case there are any red flags or legal or financial implications that haven't been already addressed in the paper, given that the nature of the amendment is different or variation on what's in the paper?
Well, I guess inherently, are those 2 recommendations, if they are what is moved, can you pass for both of them and be consistent?
So could I ask Jack Mace and Dave Boone to come back to the table, please, and address that question?
Sorry for the repetition, but can we repeat Councillor Staples' proposed amended resolution?
So the proposed amendment is to retain recommendation 1, which was that officers' restoration plan is consistent with Tūrere Whenua, and then have what's on the screen is the rest. Effectively, this becomes the feedback from the committee to the officers. There'd be a number on each paragraph. It's just hasn't been formatted that way at the moment. Is what you're reading there feedback that is consistent with
I'll pass to Jack to share his thoughts in a moment, but my thinking is that we can't answer that question at this stage. I think we need to take that away and do some analysis. There's impacts on emission targets, there's budget, there's interpretation of consistency with the reserve management plan, etc. So it's very difficult to answer that at the moment.
Okay, and what would the process of you preparing that advice and coming back to either this committee or council be? What would be the time frame if this amendment was to pass?
I think we could follow it up at the following committee meeting in a month's time.
So essentially, we'd receive the recommendation and we would review it against our current plans and determine if it's feasible and viable and consistent. That's the request, and we would bring advice back for March 26th.
Okay, I think that answers the process question from Councillor Connolly, but yes, you may comment again.
Just only to note that we can't comment on the first note because to provide advice back on that, we would need to go back and look at the consultation records itself. Understand there's experience within the room of that period, but at an
yes, that would be, if it passes, that would be a note from the committee. It is the recommends bits that we would need officers' advice on in order to take forward. Is there anyone else who would like to comment and debate on this amendment?
Mine's more of a question to the chair. They're two quite different amendments, different proposals. The one that you put up has got some context that's actually really important and shouldn't be removed, and I'm not sure that Adrian, I can't speak to her, but I don't think she actually removed that, and I'm just wondering if there is a way that the two proposals can work together to come up with a single, because I don't think they're contrary, I think they're complementary.
I agree that there's quite a lot of overlap between them, and that's perhaps some of the uncertainty around the table. That might take a wee bit of wordsmithing. So, but we also have some other speakers, so I think we should hear from other people, and then we perhaps need to do some wordsmithing before we actually put it to a motion. Put it to vote. We are in debate, so I think we're Councillor.
We're on debate on the amendment.
We're on the debate on the amendment. Councillor Saw and then Councillor Gaylord.
Thank you so much. I would like to support some of the comments that Councillor Staples has raised in terms of the frustration of how perhaps all groups who have come to us around this particular recreational area have not been equally heard. And I guess for me that points to a broader concern or observation I've had in terms of how we go about our engagement. In some areas we do it really well, in other areas we don't, and I don't feel there's a consistency, and that lack of consistency is why we land up in these places. So that's my first comment around our engagement and our, I guess, identification of stakeholders. Just sort of between the recommendations that the chair has put forward and the ones in the amendments, I guess I'm trying to find a comfort zone of where are we sitting at governance level and where are we starting to drift into things that may be a little bit more operational. I'm not comfortable with where I'm landing between the two sets of recommendations, the recommendations and the amendments. So just want to flag that. But I do think we are at a point where this committee needs to give a bit more direction, because we do require more certainty. Even in, I've been here for 4 years and I still haven't seen what the progress is in this space. So I do share some of the frustrations. My other comment would be around notes 2B, around the comment around central government and public pressure. I feel that if we start to indicate this in our recommendations, we could be inserting a note like that in almost every
committee. So that could be relevant for issues around rail, that could be around issues for fare increases, around rates capping. So, it could, and in previous times in this committee, I've sort of raised the question of, the amount of staff time spent responding to this legislative reform that we're all going through at the moment. So I have a little bit of discomfort around that, or would like to see some consistency of us as a committee on where we're sitting in those sorts of notes.
Thank you. Councillor Gale.
Lovely, thank you. I don't know, my comment, I want to make a comment to colleagues around the number 2 notes there, because I was at the meeting where we met with the group, and having identified that they hadn't been consulted with in that public consultation process, and because it was quite a few years ago, and so a bit hazy on some very some details, but this was a group of people who were very involved in this space, and I don't understand why they weren't consulted with or didn't feel they had been, and then we're acknowledging that today because at that meeting we had with, and where there was senior staff there, and I was there representing our committee, I guess, that we acknowledged that and said we would consult with them, and then we haven't. So I think we actually need to acknowledge that oversight more clearly in there. And I don't, it's getting confusing if we do an amendment to an amendment, but I just want to push through that we didn't consult with a group of people. We apologised for that. We met with them in person, apologised for that, and to try and restore a good faith relationship with them, we said we would include them in things, and then we didn't. I don't know how we make sure we don't do this sort of thing to people. They've got a really big petition. They're not just 1 or 2 people pretending to represent people. They may or may not represent those people, but they actually had a lot of people who agreed with them or wanted something to be discussed and reconsidered. So I don't know how we do this. Well, but I think we ought to wear this more and acknowledge it more clearly there, because still to that group of people, this does not acknowledge a whole chunk of events that happened in terms of we promised them we would do better by them, and at the time when it was kind of a early, I don't know if it was April, May or something, we promised them that by the end of the year when we were going to be doing something, that we would consult with them. That several years later we didn't.
Thank you, Councillor Gadel. I'm going to take a moment to comment myself, and then we've got Councillor Tupou on the speaking list too. There are 2 layers of the consultation aspect here, and I think the big failing from my perspective has been the lack of timely master planning, which is prescribed in Te Reo Whenua, a statutory document, and it is prescribed as happening within the first 3 years of that document. It is now 5 years since that document was approved. That master planning was to be the process of engaging, of listening, of consulting. I would vote against this amendment for a number of reasons. One is that I don't agree with A. So I was present for the Te Reo Whenua public consultation process. A number of the members of Preserve Belmont Farm and the petition signatories submitted on that. That group did not exist when Te Reo Whenua was, so it was not consulted because it did not exist. It was established to oppose or to take a different view than what Te Reo Whenua set out. So I don't think we can say that Greater Wellington did not engage that group in the Toitū Te Whenua, because that group didn't exist, and also many members of that group, including the public meetings I went to, had people from the grazing licence at the time and others. There was a lot of robust debate about the role of grazing and so on in that consultation process. So I would vote against it because I disagree that that is an accurate and fair statement. I also look at the agree motions, and I don't actually see that much different from what officers are proposing. 5 years instead of 4 years. In my mental calculation, if I add up the headwaters of the Korokoro and Speedy Stream, their major tributaries and significant wetlands and erosion-prone hills of Porirua Harbour catchment, I get a greater number of hectares to retire in this amendment than what our officers are actually proposing. Unless we were to build lots of fences to carve up existing paddocks, in which case we would need a few $1 million more in our budgets. So I don't, and I also note that in the questioning and advice, well, actually it's in the paper, but in the questioning and conversation that has taken place, there has been very little mention of Greater Wellington's commitment to climate change, which is a requirement in our terms of reference for this committee. And so I'm pleased to see the recommendation here that acknowledges that this will or may result, depending on advice which we'd have to get from officers on what the actual implications of this amendment are, have an effect on our emissions plans and targets, which we as a regional council are required to take a leadership role. So for those reasons, I don't support the amendment. However, in the recommendation points there in substance, I think that is largely the same as what my motion is trying to do, giving feedback on what the officers are trying to do in their paper. And I think in some ways the heat of the situation, the polarisation of view from the public is making it hard to see the wood for the trees, so to speak, here. That's my comment. Councillor Tupou is in debate.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. And in debate, I just want to raise firstly that I support the initial recommendation on the basis that I'm concerned about further delays to restoration work. Officers have advised that targeted planting triggers the self-regeneration. And if we accept that, then a pause doesn't simply delay this, but it sort of delays the tipping point at which the ecosystem becomes self-sustaining. But also, Mr. Chair, if the varying views between these two pathways are merging in the recommendations, namely what Councillor Staples has proposed, then I would be comfortable moving forward in consensus and kotahitanga. Because I think it's important that we demonstrate that at the table amidst these sensitive times in the community, and take a leadership role in good faith. And this being, and for me being a new councillor on this side of not being here last triennium, and hearing how we got to this point and perhaps things were missed along the way, that this is an opportunity for a reset and a recommitment to the good folk who have come in today. Kia ora.
Thank you. It draws to an end debate on the amendment. Can I take a straw poll from the committee on two options? One is to simply vote on the amendment and then go from there. The other option would be along the lines of Councillor Tupou's idea that we seek for more sort of synthesising of the two and more kotahitanga. That would probably involve either an adjournment in order to work out what those words are, or we could defer this paper, leave it on the table to be continued later, or some option like that. So the question is, do we vote on what we have written before us now, or do we find a way to defer and find, we might just end up back where we started, but, so just a straw poll. Who, hands up if you would like to take a vote on the amendment? And hands up if you would like to pause it. To find a way through. Okay. A bit divided, not the kotahitanga on the straw pollers. However, I think it behoves us to try and find some more clear direction from the committee before we move forward. One moment, please.
If you do it.
My challenge as chair is we're well over time already. So to adjourn the meeting and if we let it lie on the table till next month, then that's a month of uncertainty.
But aren't we going to have to get further advice from councillors?
If the amendment passes, we will need to get further advice. If the amendment does not pass and the initial motion is put, then we don't need to get that further advice. So I actually suggest we need to cut through. We've got other items on the agenda that we haven't got to. We can't defer everything to next month. So I think we're going to need to put the amendment. Is that a point of order, Councillor?
Sorry, it's a practical question. Delaying by a month, does it put the officers in a difficult position over the lease?
Oh, well, I presume it would just delay any progressing of it for a month. I doubt it. They can't have, because we haven't given the authority to proceed yet. So we're going to put the amendment. Sorry, Councillor Staples, I'd like to be able to iron it out. But so the amendment is, as on the screen, moved by Councillor Staples, seconded by Councillor Elder. One moment.
Are we adding in the acknowledgement of the petition into the amendment?
Okay, with a little addition of notes, the petition received, words to that effect.
Acknowledge receipt of the petition and thank the submitters for their.
Do we want a response from the chair of the committee as well to those who?
Yes, the chair of the committee has offered to meet with this group many times and been declined, but I can write a letter instead. So someone requested to see the original motion before we take the vote. I think we can probably do that. So the commonality in words is the number one recommendation is in both. The difference is the specific areas of feedback.
Mr. Chair, do I get a right of reply?
You do actually, so how about you take that now? Sorry, Councillor Staples,
no,
I'm new at this.
There's just a couple of things that I would like to address. In that, first, I acknowledge that the group did get an opportunity to meet with Councillor Duthie. At that time, he was not chair of the Environment Committee, and he was very much seen as a councillor that was proactive with the environment groups and not, I guess, not open to the Belmont Park, Farm Park people's ideas. And indeed, all of the councillors around the table were considered to be in that position except for me, which I found rather sad, that they thought that the only councillor at the table at the time that would listen to them was me in Wairarapa. So there's nothing personal there, but I think it should be noted in light of Councillor Duthie's comments. And there was another thing that has now just gone from my mind because of my advanced age. So never mind. But I just I would like to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Staples. So we've had a glance back at the initial motion. We've got the, which one's that? That's the amendment is on the screen. We're now going to take a vote on the amendment. So all those in favour of the amendment as is on the screen, raise your hands. If we can just count that up, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And all those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so that amendment has passed, and therefore the initial motion disappears because the amendment is the substantive motion. And do we need to vote on it again? Yep. Even though it hasn't changed a bit. No one change their votes, please, because that wouldn't be consistent. I guess you can. You could. Well, yeah. Okay. So then we move to. Do we redebate? We technically redebate, but is there anything more to say? I don't think so. Right. Well, I've said all I need to say. So, a seconder, would you like to say anything? So then we take a vote on the amendment, which is now the substantive motion. All those in favour, say aye. Aye. And all those against? Okay. Do you want that recorded? Yes, please. So we have reached the end of that item, and the amendment or what the resolution has passed gives the officers a bit of work to do. We still have 5 items on the agenda, but it's 12:42. So I do think we actually have to break for lunch because we certainly couldn't fit all those in. So we'll break for lunch now. The meeting will have to continue after lunch, which will push the workshop back. But we are required to. The meeting takes precedence, and we may need to leave some of the remaining items on the table for this, the next meeting. But we'll get to that when we get back. So let's reconvene at 12. At 1. So it's a short lunch, 20 minutes. Reconvening at 1 o'clock. Thank you. Committee, we now have quorum, so we will recommence the meeting. Live streaming is back on. And given our time constraints and the situation, I'm just going to ask Leanne for a comment.
Good afternoon, councillors. Due to the time constraints, I am proposing to withdraw the following items from the agenda today. Agenda item 6, Ropotaia Strategic Framework. Agenda item 7, Gollins Valley Update. Agenda item 9, Whaitua Implementation Programme. These 3 agenda items will be moved for the next meeting.
Thank you. So we don't need to take a vote on that because the Chief Executive's delegate has done the withdrawing, which leaves us with items 8, 10 and 11. So starting with item 8 on the highly pathogenic avian influenza and Greater Wellington's preparedness and response, we have at the table some lovely looking men whose names I will have to... I know Andy, and I think I know the pink shirt guy, Dave, and is it Roger? We've talked on the phone, haven't we, Roger? Good to see you. So thank you. If you can, we're obviously under time constraint, so we'll take it largely as read, but we did have a public presenter on the topic, so if you have any comment of addition you'd like to make or highlight to make, then we can have questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, our introduction was stolen this morning by public participation, so nothing further to add to that. It was a very good summary of the risk, and this paper is obviously our response planning in there, so happy to answer any questions that you may have for us on that.
Thank you. I'd like to start with a question, given our public presenter this morning. What would be Greater Wellington's role in working with Fish and Game New Zealand on response to this, given their active expertise and on the ground management and potential to work collaboratively as we respond?
Yeah, so our role in managing HPAI is obviously responses on our own land and land that we manage. And we also play a role in coordinating across the regions with our local TAs and the other DOC and the other agencies that operate within our rohi. And we do play a role in providing some of that information through from MPI. The primary link for Fish and Game is to MPI and through MPI. So it sounds like they're connected there, but there is opportunities obviously to connect at the local level as well to make sure we're aligned.
Thank you. Any other questions from councillors? Councillor Staples. Sorry.
Thank you. This was something that Councillor Johnson brought up, and unfortunately she couldn't stay. And looking at our own properties, our own regional parks, if we were to have mass dead birds, how are we planning education around whether the public should handle them or move them, or if they're dead on a path and their dog rolls in them, all those sorts of things, because especially large waterfowl are pretty horrible, stinky things when they're dead. Just getting my head around that.
Yeah, and that's been part of the work we've been doing with the likes of MPI and with the regional sector, particularly on awareness signage, so the same with our TA partners, and that consistent messaging, consistent signage to get out into all of our parks. And we're currently looking at the number of signs that we need to get out there, and then thinking about a more targeted engagement with some of the concessions and main user groups of those parks and recreational areas to advise them of the risk and the key messages essentially, which are if there's 3 or more bird carcasses, don't handle, and phone MPI through the hotline, and then we'll work through the management process. And the approach we're taking is particularly in those high visitor use areas, what we're calling front country, would essentially be collection and removal of those carcasses, and then awareness signage in the backcountry areas, and again, let nature take its course.
Thank you. I haven't seen any further questions, so appreciate the paper. It's a for information paper, so we are informed now, and fingers crossed. It's a when, not if, but when it does happen, we respond well. Thank you, staff. Moving on to item 10 on the agenda, which is the Climate Emergency Response Programme, current status and upcoming matters. So this is an update on our climate work. Remembering in the previous triennium, there was a climate committee which would receive these papers on a regular basis. This is the bringing of a similar report to this committee for your information. Jake and Sophia, would you like to make a few comments? If we could just keep them brief, focused, anything new to highlight, and then we'll take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The only thing that changes day to day is the carbon price. So since I wrote this paper, it's come up a bit. So instead of being 60% lower than its high, it's actually only 50% lower than its high. But otherwise, yeah, happy for the paper to be taken as read.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions? There's one there. Yes, Councillor Free.
I guess just thinking about mitigation, adaptation, and just looking at the risk of slips across, as we've seen across New Zealand actually. Is there anything specific that Greater Wellington's doing to kind of encourage planting of bare land? I mean, we've just had a presentation about the risk of erosion in the previous paper. But generally speaking, what are we doing to manage slope stability and reduce erosion around the region?
Thank you, Councillor.
I will defer to my Environment Group colleagues for a fulsome answer.
I can just speak to some measures that we've taken since Manuao and the tragedy there in Tauranga. Sorry, I've missed the previous conversation. We're taking a look across our own land that we manage to determine the risk to the public, essentially. We'll do some geotechnical assessment on a risk basis as part of our management program. And we're also reviewing our emergency management procedures across all of our campsites to make sure they're fit for purpose. In addition, the team that look at the flood hazard mapping are considering whether or not more work could be needed or useful around general advice on slope stability across the landscape, noting that some councils, like Nelson, have undertaken that work, but it has been very controversial and fraught with the public.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question in relation to paragraph 19, where it says Council has other emission units from its growing native forests that could be put into the LCAF, the Low Carbon Acceleration Fund, or sold outside of it. And I presume those, in fact it says currently amount and then increasing each year. Is that a decision point at some stage as to what we do, the choice of what happens to those? And at what point would that come to committee for consideration?
This is a for information paper, but I'm sort of setting out potential for decision papers to come to this committee in the coming months. We haven't decided the exact timing. Decision on what to do with those emissions units could be taken anytime. They don't expire or disappear. So that is something that if there was strong interest, it could even come to the next committee or the next convenient slot.
Thank you. Any other questions from councillors? Okay, I'll just end with one more, and that relates to our conversation paper earlier about Belmont Regional Park. What is the scale of implication for our climate commitments and targets if council was to choose not to retire farmland in Belmont Regional Park at scale? Is it material?
Yes, it is material. So if we take out the Belmont grazing retirement from projections of future emissions, bearing in mind that there are lots of other pieces at play here, this is the entire emissions footprint of the Greater Wellington Group, but assuming that everything else stays the same and is on the pathway shown in the attachment to achieving our targets, without Belmont grazing retirement, we would miss our targets. All of them. Yeah.
Significantly or marginally?
I've just for the 2030 target, we would miss it by, on these numbers, 2.5%, and then we would miss our 2035 target by 7%, and we would miss our but these are very rough numbers. I would the further out it goes, the more hazy it gets. Because other actions could be taken, but generally speaking, the pathway to achieve our targets is can't really leave any significant area of action untouched. Yeah.
Okay. And so, just a follow-up question on that: if once the direction of travel for Belmont becomes clear. So right now we've made a resolution that will then go for some officer advice, and once that becomes clear, you would come back to us with a paper around revising our targets as if necessary. Is that correct?
Yes, of course, we would explain all the implications of the decision. That's part of the climate change consideration process, is to set all of that out. So you would have that information. The implications of not achieving our targets. Yeah, well, I can foresee a few. One, for example, is that our level of targets is related to what's the local government funding agency is looking for in order for us to qualify for our climate action loans that we obtain from them. So if we can't achieve those targets, we've got weaker targets, then suddenly we don't fit the criteria, and then there are financial implications.
And that was in one of the papers at $2 million potential.
That's one estimate, yeah.
Okay, some water to flow under the bridge. Thank you. There are no further questions I can see, and I don't have any further. So thank you very much for your time. Moving on to the final paper, Roputaio Environment Group Activity Update, which I'll hand over to Leanne to make some initial comments on, and then open to questions.
Thank you, Chair. We've included in the pack the group activity update. This has changed slightly since the last triennium. This will be iterative based on feedback from councillors and staff. We're trying to make it as useful and meaningful to you as possible. The few changes that have been included this triennium are we've included a catchment overview profile, just so you get a sense of the bigger picture there in terms of the landscape. So that gives you that higher level, more strategic information on the mana whenua of the place, the strategic overview of the catchment and some of the key work happening there. This information will be fairly stable, so we might appendicize that in the future to make the report less long, but we just wanted to put it in there as a form of induction in this particular update. Across the regional and catchment activity updates, we're orientating our storytelling around services, and that's because that's how we're proposing our LTP activity groupings will be shown to you as we go through that process as well. So councillors will be able to see the direct link to the framing used in the LTP by putting everything into those services. Of course, we're always happy to take any feedback on how you're finding it, and we can reiterate along the way. On that, in terms of the report itself, I just wanted to draw your attention to, of course, Moa Point, and just make a statement about that before we open up to any comments or questions. So we have briefly acknowledged Moa Point in the Roputaio activity report for February, and so that's part of your pack. Greater Wellington operates across several distinct but related roles in relation to the incident at Moa Point wastewater treatment plant. And one of our statutory responsibilities as a council is being the environmental regulator. In direct response to the incident, we have activated a formal investigation and have multiple teams across our organisation working together as part of that investigation. We are unable to comment on potential actions at this stage, as these will be determined by the outcome of our investigation. We have a live Q&A and update page linked to the GW website to support the public with any questions they have about our role and responsibilities related to this incident. And I'll open it up to any comments or questions. We have a few officers, hopefully, that are still here.
Thank you. Just a comment first. I encouraged brevity in reports because I know it's hard to read, but it is useful to have a comprehensive activity report for our first meeting, especially for new councillors, to get a sense of the breadth and diversity of work that happens within the environment group. So thank you for that, and thank you for those comments on that specific issue, Leanne. Questions, and through your question, you're welcome to give feedback on how this report could be improved over time, formatting, things coming through, highlighting, whatever. Councillor Rhodes, to start with, please indicate if you'd like to be on the speaking list.
Thank you. How embedded is the harbour record, or how embedded or not, is the harbour record in your work program at the moment?
Who would like to answer that? Nicola Patrick.
Yeah, kia ora, thanks, Councillor Rhodes.
We're really active in the program, as you'll see in the report, and we're right at the point of how do we bring it back into influencing our program investments, and how does that tie into the LTP planning where we can make bigger changes. So we will bring you a separate paper updating on the Porirua Harbour Accord itself once we've gone through those steps, so that you can see exactly what level we're at.
Councillor Staples.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is on page 261 of diligent number 18, Wellington Region Erosion Control Initiative. Now, I know very well how this works in Wairarapa, but is this initiative actually available to us as owners or administrators of the land in the Porirua erosion area, the harbour, sensitive harbour area? So that's my question. Just a quick comment with regards to this report. We went through a stage a few years back where, in interest of shorter meetings and brevity, this report or its forerunner was canned, and we actually made a bit of a fuss about it because this is a way of showing the public, having in a public record what we are doing. So I would be very loath to have it too much slash and burn when it's information that, by coming to this meeting, puts it directly in the public eye and is an opportunity for further press releases, etc., to highlight the good work that we do. So that's just my comment there. Thanks.
Appreciate that feedback. Thank you, Councillor Staples. Jack Mace, are you or someone else able to comment on, as paragraph 18, the Wellington Region Erosion Control Initiative? Dave Boone.
Can you just be more clear about what the question was in regards to paragraph 18?
Availability.
Yes, sorry, is the program, the Reki program, is that subsidy available to us as a landowner or administrator for the erosion-prone areas of the Porirua Harbour that we're talking about, restoration, etc.? Because if we could get some money from our friends in government, that would be great.
Short answer is no, it's not available to public organisations.
Sometimes short answers are not what you want to hear. Thank you, Councillor Free.
Yeah, well, you can probably expect to hear quite a bit about slope stability from me, coming from Wellington with very steep hills. Is it available to Wellington landowners, Wellington City landowners, to plant or whatever, to shore up banks?
Sorry, that's a follow-up question of what support is available for erosion control regionally?
Yeah, just looking at the paragraph 18 about the Wellington Regional Erosion Control Initiative. And I'm asking, it mentions farming, but is it actually available to metro landowners?
The way the program is prioritized is the consideration of erosion-prone land through land use classification, which is almost by default rural areas.
Okay.
We do have other programs of support with that are applicable to any small lifestyle block or townie property owners. The difficulty being that the resources are prioritized for sensitive environments, sensitive receiving environments with water quality issues, and where the work will lead to the best benefit for the catchment. Working with lifestyle block owners in an urban smaller block owners is notoriously difficult because they're very small projects, and our staff are often focused on the bigger bang for buck, larger scale remediation works in rural areas.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And some, no. Councillor Tupou, question.
Through the chair, noting the role of GW as the environmental regulator concerning Moore Point, do we know what the timeline for completion of the investigation looks like? That's the first question.
ask Fatima to respond to that, please.
The investigation has commenced. I think we had indicated, these investigations usually take about 6 to 12 months, but we can't comment at this stage on how long it will be.
And the second question is, have we, in light of advice yesterday from Wellington City Council, namely from Mayor Little, concerning the safety of swimming in southern Wellington, in the southern bays, is that consistent with the advice we're giving?
Our water quality monitoring program that informs LAWA, the advisors that sort of work in that space also connect with Wellington Water and Public Health. So the advice is consistent about those bays and the water quality levels there. So we are consistent right across Wellington Water and our information as well.
Thank you. I'm just wanting to ensure that our website, Mr. Chair, updates are up to date. Kia ora.
Okay, I'm confident they are, but perhaps that could just be checked. Thank you, Fatima.
Yeah, it's a modelled program for LAWA, so it is updated regularly.
Thank you. Councillor Connolly.
I have two questions. The first one is around the Reina, the rare parasitic plant, and the bats, which together form a page 278. Together form a group. They work together, from what I was reading. So it's talked about. They've mapped out more opportunities for further work. I'm just wondering if we could get an insight into what that further work is, and also can you provide assurance that the work of Mauri Tōhono is connected into this project?
Dave Hickins, please.
Yeah, by the chair. We'll have to come back to you with the specifics, Ros. They will be compliant. We are working with mana whenua, so a lot of the priorities and future opportunities we're coming up with are mana whenua driven, and we're a partner in that, and we're helping enable them. We'll come back to you with specifics if that's okay.
Some specifics on the actions. I'm also curious as to the role of Mauri Tōhono.
Will do.
Okay. My other question is probably for Nicola. I can't get my diligent to move at the moment, but I remember what it's about. The Waifatu project, I think it's mentioned in this general update report. It was also mentioned in your Whaitua update, and in the Whaitua update there was a comment about your engagement with mana whenua and how mana whenua mentioned that there'd been a lot of talk, too much hui, not enough dui. And so I'm wondering if you can update me on actually what actions are coming out of that work, and do we have any plan, or will plans be at a stage that they can be costed through the long-term plan when we get to that stage? I'm just worried that this is another project that is dragged on without actually any tangible outcomes for a long time.
Nicola Patrick.
Yeah, kia ora. I did have my colleague here to answer that, but he's not here anymore, so I'll just do my absolute best, which is that the coming together to agree what is within our control and timeframes and how that might feed into the long-term plan is in action, but it is subject to competing priorities within that wider catchment. And when we started this work, probably about 2 years ago, Waifatu was very clearly the top priority. There are now some competing priorities. So we are trying to navigate what that actually means when it comes to putting forward at first internal proposals so that we're not coming to council for extra money. Because we know that putting forward for extra money, even for really important places, isn't the context we're in right now. But I think I probably need to come back to you with a bit more depth, eh?
When you said that's now, like, there are other priorities, for whom? Is it for us or is it for mana whenua?
From mana whenua in particular, they're saying, yes, absolutely, it's still important, but can you also look at the other streams in our rohe? While Waifatu absolutely is critical, it's not necessarily more important than the other places. So we're trying to take a broader look and trying to do that in a cost-constrained environment.
I would appreciate, I think particularly, Waifatu was extremely badly hit with the floods the other week, and the combination of flooding and sea level rise and all the important things that are there, including a lot of mana whenua assets, suggests that it definitely is a priority, but appreciate that it's not the only priority. So if you have any more info or, reports or anything in that space, if you could walk them through.
Absolutely, happy to. And the other key partner that we're discussing with is Hutt City Council as well around that. So I don't think that there's been any lowering of Waifatu. It's been more the challenge of how can we consider this alongside the other key streams in our catchment.
Thank you. I see Councillor Saw.
Thank you. Someone had to ask a question around the Harbour Master topics since it's moved out of FRAC. My question's around on page 272 of Diligent and around sort of paragraph 50 to 53 around the Mana Bridge. I just wanted to check whether this was an issue that had also been raised at FRAC in the previous term, and just wanting a little bit of more detail around the contractor that was employed there, and also what is the progress around Titahi Bay and conflicting water users.
Jack Mace, I'll ask Jack.
Yeah, unfortunately, Grant's had to leave. He was here earlier. I'll attempt to answer to my best of my knowledge. The Mana Bridges area is an area where boats launch, but it's also very popular with the local community for swimming. In the past, we've done things like put poles in to try to separate people and ropes, and they get pulled out. We had a contractor there, I believe, was physically assaulted by a gang member, and so it's not been safe to send someone back down there. Grant has worked a little bit with the police to try to arrange some people down there, but because of that tension, it's just not really safe. There's been discussion with Porirua City about what could be done, including potentially putting in like a hard stand ramp there, but we've not made any progress, so it remains a vexed issue for us.
I may not remember this correctly, but isn't one of the mitigations for this is to move to the other side, to move the boat ramp to the other side, because it is quite a popular recreational area, but that's a Porirua City Council issue, isn't it? Is there any progress on that particular issue? Because I think we did try to highlight this. Okay.
Yeah, I think we've had some discussions with them, but no progress is to date.
Okay, and then could you just update me on what's happening out in Titahi Bay? It says conflicting water uses at Titahi Bay, and I was just wondering whether that is a similar situation that we often have in the inner harbour here in Wellington around Freiburg Beach with various leisure craft and swimmers and stuff. So I just want to understand if it was a similar situation.
Yeah, I'm not sure, sorry, but I could ask Grant to follow up with an email to you if you would like.
I'm also interested in those things, Councillor Saw, because the Harbour Master role is not a familiar one for me, but my great-great-grandfather was once on the Harbour Board. So perhaps you and I could sit down with Grant and Alder and catch up on some of that. That's all the questions. So while we're talking about Grant, I'll just mention that I was chatting to him before this meeting, and we have created great entertainment for the residents of Eastbourne over the last week with Moaning Minnie, the light that sits on Barrett Reef, dislodged during the storm and floated in the harbour past all the houses of Eastbourne. Grant received many, many phone calls from diligent Eastbourneites reporting that the stationary lighthouse was drifting, and it's now currently temporarily anchored in Lowry Bay while they try and find a bit for it to put it back. And it doesn't moan anymore because that was a siren thing that used to be on it, driven by the swell in the old days. But anyway, so a little bit I learnt from Grant before this meeting. Thank you everyone for your patience for this rather long and complex meeting. Yes, I'm baptised. We have reached the end, and we now have a council workshop, so up to whoever's chairing that as to whether we go straight into it or take a break. So I will close off this meeting. Can I ask Councillor Tupou for a closing karakia, please?
Kia ora tātou. The prescribed karakia whakamutinga for today. Kia tau te rangi Māori e ki runga ki raro ki roto ki waho. Ai o ki te ao rangi ka whakamaua kia tina ui e tai ki.